A hand makes a decisive move on the go board. His opponent, a man with a smug grin, boasts about his clever play. But the man in the suit remains unfazed, calmly assessing the situation. The first man changes the subject, reaching for a snack. He brings up a personal matter, his daughter's upcoming wedding. The scarred man politely declines, explaining he'll be working that day. Annoyed by the excuse, the older man pours himself a drink. He throws back the shot with a grimace of frustration. The empty cup is slammed down onto the table. Then, his tone softens as he reminisces about his daughter growing up. He admits that watching his daughter grow up so fast feels a little sad. He then tries to connect with his opponent, asking about his own daughter. But the scarred man shuts him down, warning him about drinking on the job. The older man accuses him of changing the subject to avoid losing the game. Suddenly, the scarred man's attention is pulled away by a faint sound. The scene shifts, revealing a grotesque figure lying on the floor. A memory surfaces of a young student facing that same monstrous creature. The memory flashes to a dark facility filled with workers in hazmat suits. The creature from the past crawls forward, begging for help in its agony, and the memory focuses on the horrific procedures performed in that hidden lab. The memory deepens, showing workers frantically handling their grotesque cargo. As one of the subjects collapses, a supervisor barks orders to restrain it. But the man in charge, a younger version of his opponent, just smiles casually. A worker points out the subject's pain, only to be told the anesthesia wore off. The supervisor's eyes narrow, annoyed by the compassion being shown. The worker presses on, questioning the morality of their horrific experiments. But a younger, unscarred version of our protagonist coldly shuts him down. The supervisor then turns to the subject with a look of mock sympathy. He lectures that their project requires a steady supply of fresh bodies, and the memory lingers on the silent, agonizing tears of the victim. The memory fades, leaving only the haunting image of the victim's face. The supervisor offers a twisted form of comfort to the suffering man, promising that everyone in this area will eventually share his fate. Back in the present, the scarred man places a stone on the board. His opponent's smug expression instantly vanishes, replaced by shock. He stumbles back, marveling at the incredible move just played. But our protagonist rises, announcing it's time to meet the VIP. As the older man worries about the smell of alcohol, the true nature of their audience is revealed. One of the grotesque figures, the same one from the memory, begs for salvation, but its plea fades as the life drains from its eyes. Another of the grotesque subjects cries out, its face a mask of agony. The protagonist watches on, his eyes reflecting the grim scene before him. He stands silently beside the nervous police official, who adjusts his cap. The scene then shifts to a seemingly normal day at a local high school, but the students are buzzing about a body recently discovered at Songchun Port. On the rooftop, a young man reads the news, realizing the port is dangerously close. He worries aloud if they could be in danger as well if they're not careful. But he's not alone, as his friend sits quietly on the ledge behind him. The friend calmly states that he's already in deep trouble. The first student is stunned, asking what a promising judo athlete could have possibly done. The judo athlete reveals he was passed over for the school representative spot. He looks up with a somber expression, accepting there must be a reason for it all. The spot was given to Park Seong-min, a rival he's always been able to defeat. The reason, it seems, has little to do with skill and everything to do with family connections. The kid was born with a golden spoon, his wealth and status on full display. Compared to that, he's just a kid from the countryside who came here alone to study. His friend throws himself back in disgust, sarcastically cheering for the bright future of athletics. He finds the thought of Seong-min's arrogance sickening, relieved that he was absent today. The judo athlete is left feeling utterly powerless, wondering what he can even do. But their conversation is cut short by the ringing of the school bell. His friend gets up, reminding him they'll be late for Korean literature. But as his friend heads for the door, Minho stays put, his gaze fixed on the grounds below. His eyes lock onto something unexpected. A solitary figure stands in the middle of the empty schoolyard. He leans in, trying to understand what he's seeing. It looks like a little kid all alone. His friend calls out his name, Kim Minho, urging him to hurry up. But Minho is completely captivated by the strange vision. When his friend looks back to see, the figure has vanished. Minho turns, bewildered as his friend asks what he's doing. The scene cuts to a young girl on a rooftop, inviting someone to join her. A lone figure plummets through the sky. The story then shifts to a quiet apartment building later that night. Inside, Minho lies in his bed, scrolling through his phone. He finds something odd, a strange lack of activity. He'd expected his rival Park Seong-min to be bragging all over social media, but Seong-min's last post was 3 days ago. He's been completely silent. A flicker of suspicion crosses Minho's face. His mind flashes back to the last time they sparred, a match he easily won. He remembers standing over his defeated rival as others rushed to check on him. He remembers the look of pure malice on Seong-min's face. His rival had exploded in a fit of rage after the match. He'd grabbed Minho by the collar, refusing to accept his defeat. Seong-min then resorted to insults, reminding Minho of his father's influence. He threatened to completely destroy Minho's future in the sport. But Minho had simply clapped the dust from his hands. and turned to walk away from the sore loser. He calmly told his rival to go ahead and try. The memory ends with Seungmin's face contorted in pure, impotent fury. Back in the present, Minho muses that he never thought the threat was real, but he's still puzzled by Seungmin's silence. He notes that Seungmin isn't even showing up to school, wondering if he should be relieved. But he quickly dismisses the thought, realizing there's nothing fortunate about his life being ruined. He thinks about the debt he's in just to pursue this dream, and the crushing weight of having to tell his mom. The pressure is immense, a wave of despair washing over him. Suddenly, a strange, high-pitched wail cuts through the silence. Outside his window, a figure is collapsed on the ground, letting out a pained cry. He peers out, disgusted by the state of his neighborhood. He turns away, deciding to deal with his family tomorrow, feeling the weight of his failure. As he draws the curtains to block out the world, he catches one last glimpse of the strange scene unfolding in the alley below. Through the narrow gap, he can just make out the strange form in the darkness. The next morning, a hand lies still and pale beside a pile of trash. The scene cuts to the schoolyard, where someone is shouting for Kim Min-ho. In the classroom, his friend rushes over, asking if he's heard the incredible news. He reveals that their rival, Park Seungmin, has suddenly transferred to a school in Seoul. Minho jumps to his feet, demanding to know if he's telling the truth. His friend recounts how he overheard a loud phone call near the gym that morning. It was their coach, arguing about the sudden transfer and some kind of broken promise. The friend insists he saw the coach's flustered expression with his own 2 eyes. Minho is left completely stunned, trying to process what this sudden development means. His friend grins, confirming that with Seungmin gone, Minho is now officially the school representative. He's just glad he doesn't have to see that arrogant rival's face anymore. But then a thought strikes him, as he realizes 2 other prominent students are also absent. A sudden wave of fear hits him as he wonders if all the missing kids were wealthy. He turns to ask Minho what he thinks, but finds his desk is now empty. He figures Minho must have gone to the rooftop, his usual place to think things over. But before he can move, a hand suddenly grips his shoulder. A strange man with a sinister grin leans in, asking where Minho went. The friend can only stare back in pure, unadulterated terror. On the school rooftop, Minho looks out over the city, trying to process the news. He can't understand why Seungmin would suddenly transfer schools. But a slow smile spreads across his face as he realizes he has hope again. His moment of relief is shattered by a familiar, aggressive voice calling his name. The voice mockingly asks if he's happy about the turn of events. Stepping out from the doorway is Park Seungmin himself, looking anything but friendly. Minho is completely stunned, asking why he's here and not at his new school. Seungmin scoffs, annoyed that Minho is complaining about his sudden move. He explains that while he was at his new house yesterday, he had a thought. With a sinister grin, he reveals his new idea. He could just quit judo. Seungmin's face twists in fury, admitting it was unfair he didn't get to see Minho's despair. So he came back to put that look of frustration on Minho's face himself. He squares up, dismissing judo as a game and claiming Minho is nothing in a real fight. Minho quietly considers his rival's words. He turns away, agreeing that Seungmin is right and telling him to leave since he's already lost. He admits that his own life is ruined, with judo being the only thing he has. He calmly tells Seungmin to go home before his parents start to worry. But this calm dismissal only enrages Seungmin further, his fist clenching in fury. He lunges forward, screaming that he's always hated the way Minho looks down on him. Minho simply turns, his expression completely unfazed by the incoming attack. With a single fluid motion, Minho counters the attack, his eyes cold and focused as he executes a perfect throw. Seungmin hits the ground hard, the air knocked from his lungs. He stands over his rival, telling him to stop wasting his time. Seungmin struggles to his knees, insisting he doesn't want to cause any trouble. But his expression shifts into a deranged, unsettling smile. Minho calmly points out that causing a scene won't help either of them. His rival's hand slowly reaches for a nearby flower pot. He then lunges forward, sarcastically suggesting they should just part ways. And suddenly a figure is sent plummeting from the rooftop. Lying on the ground, bloodied but defiant, Minho dares him to say it again. But Seungmin just grins maniacally, straddling him and raising the broken pot. He promises to silence Minho for good, his face a mask of pure hatred. But just as he brings the weapon down, a strange shadow is cast against the building behind them. Seungmin freezes, wondering what kind of monstrous form he's seeing. The broken piece of pottery slips from his grasp and clatters to the ground. Minho looks up, his face splattered, one eye glowing with an unnatural light. From his back, grotesque, shadowy tendrils begin to unfurl, revealing a new, terrifying power awakening within him. Minho's face contorts in pain, his eye glowing with a terrifying power. The shadowy tendrils erupt, piercing through his rival's body. Seungmin can only scream as the darkness completely consumes him. Meanwhile, his friend lies beaten on the ground, screaming in terror. A monstrous shadow looms over another fallen student nearby. Its grotesque form is silhouetted against the bright sky. He can only watch in horror, completely powerless to intervene. He desperately calls for a teacher, trying to get help for his friend. He screams that Seungmin is on the rooftop trying to kill Minho. But back on the roof, Minho stands alone, a single tendril still lingering in the air. The rooftop door flies open, revealing a teacher and a crowd of students. His friend, looking beaten up, rushes forward to check if Minho is all right. They all look upon the aftermath, with Seongmin's body lying still on the ground. Minho sits nearby, covered in the dark substance and looking completely lost. His face is a mask of pure shock, his mind reeling from the incident. Later, the scene cuts to the quiet hallway of the school's counseling office. Minho sits alone on the couch as the vice principal paces the room. The man explains that the police and Seongmin's parents are on their way, but he insists that before they arrive, he needs to hear the story for himself. He looks Minho dead in the eye, asking what really happened up there. The entire school is buzzing with rumors about what happened on the rooftop. Minho's friend, his face still bruised, insists to his classmates that he's telling the truth. He explains that he saw the scene himself, but there's a detail that's truly shocking. He reveals that Seongmin, who was found on the ground, had his entire body covered in what looked like bite marks. The other students can only stare back in horrified silence. Nearby, another student quietly reflects that Minho's eyes always seemed a little strange. Back in the office, the vice principal looks down, his expression grim. He asks again what really happened, the image of a dazed Minho flashing in his mind. Outside, a crowd of students gathers in the hallway, whispering as Minho is led from the room. Outside the counseling office, a crowd of curious students tries to get a look inside. One of them presses his face to the door, shushing the others so he can eavesdrop. He peers through the narrow crack, trying to catch a glimpse of the interrogation. Inside, the vice principal calmly cleans his glasses as he summarizes Minho's claim that a monster appeared, attacked Seongmin, and then vanished. He turns to Minho, asking him to describe what that something was. But Minho can't answer, his glowing eye betraying the chaos in his mind. He tries to recall the shadowy form that burst from his back, but the memory is a blur of confusion and terror. He begins to wonder if he was hit too hard and simply imagined the whole thing. He wonders if he could have been the one to attack Seongmin, even unconsciously. The vice principal's voice cuts through his daze, calling out his name. Minho snaps back to reality, looking utterly lost and confused. But the man's tone softens, telling him not to force the memories. He offers a cup of tea, acknowledging how difficult this must be for the boy. Then, he says the one thing Minho desperately needs to hear, that he believes him. The vice principal repeats his statement, holding up his phone as proof. He explains that Seongmin's body was damaged in a way no human could manage. With a reassuring smile, he suggests they simply wait for the police to arrive. Minho can only agree, a flicker of hope returning to his exhausted face. But their quiet moment is shattered by a commotion just outside the office door. The door slides open, revealing a distraught woman who has just pushed her way inside. It's Seongmin's mother, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. A nearby officer explains that she forced her way past them to see her son's body on the roof. She turns her attention to the room, her voice trembling as she asks if Minho was the one. Minho can only stare back, speechless, as she directly accuses him of harming her son. The vice principal tries to de-escalate the situation, urging her to calm down. But her grief is too powerful, her tears mixing with a thirst for vengeance. She lunges forward, her face twisted in a silent, agonizing scream. Tackling Minho to the ground, she wraps her hands around his throat, demanding his life for her son's. The vice principal tries to pull her away, pleading with her to stop. Minho struggles for air, his face a mask of pain and confusion. But the mother's grief has turned to pure, unbridled rage. And in the midst of the chaos, a strange, unsettling smile appears. Suddenly, her expression shifts from fury to utter shock. She stares past Minho, her eyes fixed on a silhouette outside the window. With a flicker of desperate hope, she asks if her son is really alive. Minho looks on, completely bewildered by her sudden change. His mind flashes back to the image of Seongmin being consumed by darkness. But the mother presses against the glass, convinced her son has returned. She rationalizes that the body on the roof must have been a mistake. The scene cuts to the lifeless face of her son, Seongmin. His head is lifted by an unseen hand, revealing his battered form. The camera pans down a grotesque, segmented body. Outside the window, a monstrous creature holds Seongmin's corpse, which weakly calls out for its mother. The mother's face contorts in pure, unadulterated horror. Minho and the vice principal can only stare, paralyzed by the impossible sight. The massive creature clings to the side of the school building, presenting the body to its grieving parent. Its hands grip its own face, beginning to tear its mouth open. The monster's jaw unhinges into a terrifying, gaping maw, ready to devour its prize. The creature reveals a horrifying array of tendrils, each tipped with a grinning skull. The skulls seem to mock her, their empty sockets staring into her soul. Her grief turns to rage as she points an accusing finger, blaming Minho for her son's fate. Without warning, the monster crashes through the window, shattering glass everywhere. Its tendrils immediately wrap around the mother, lifting her into the air. She can only scream in agony as one of the skulls bites down on her face. Minho is frozen in place, watching the horrific scene unfold before him. The creature's grotesque form continues to writhe and contort. In the hallway, the other students look on in absolute terror. Her face, now twisted in pain, reaches out with a desperate plea for someone to save her. Minho sits frozen on the floor, watching the horror unfold as the vice principal looks on. The creature's shadow falls over the vice principal, who lets out a terrified scream. Panic erupts in the hallway as the students flee for their lives. They trample over each other in a desperate stampede to escape the room. But Minho's friend is left behind, paralyzed with fear on the blood-stained floor. He looks up to see the grotesque monster now looming directly over him. Its eyes glow with a malevolent energy, its mouth held shut by taut sinew. The boy can only stare back, his mind completely shattered by the sight. And then, the stitches snap as its jaw unhinges into a cavernous maw. A single thought cuts through his terror. He has to run. The creature's massive form looms in the darkness. His friend's eyes are wide with terror, his mind screaming for him to escape. But then a different monster, a gaunt figure with long hair, leans down and begins to sob. Nearby, the vice principal's hand trembles beside his fallen glasses. In a doorway, another student cowers on the ground crying as he fumbles for his own glasses. The sobbing creature turns, its face a mask of sorrow as it covers its mouth. A dirty footprint on the student's back shows he was trampled in the stampede. Back in the office, the first monster's grotesque mouth hangs open. The beast now stands over Minho, who remains frozen on the floor. Minho simply stares ahead, all the fight seemingly drained from him. The student with glasses looks up, his own fear forgotten as he processes the monster's sobs. Nearby, Minho's friend suddenly collapses to his knees, letting out a pained cry. His eyes glow with a strange white light as he hunches over in the darkness. But outside, a new sound cuts through the chaos as a commander barks orders. The student's eyes widen as he looks towards the source of the commotion. Through a shattered window, he can see figures assembled in the schoolyard below. It's a squad of soldiers, fully armed and holding their formation. A flicker of hope appears on his face as he realizes help has finally arrived. Minho's friend sees them too, believing that if he can just get outside, he'll be safe. He begins to crawl through the debris, desperate to reach the soldiers. He crawls desperately through the wreckage, his body battered and bruised. He pushes himself forward, believing he's almost there. He sees the shattered window, thinking he can survive the jump from the second floor. With hope in his eyes, he reaches for freedom, unaware of the shadow looming behind him. But just as he's about to escape, a dark hand clamps down on his shoulder. Grotesque tendrils erupt from the darkness, wrapping around his body and lifting him off the ground. He struggles in their grip, his face a mask of pure terror. The creature drags him upwards, pulling him through a gaping hole in the ceiling. It's the same monster from before, its skull-faced tendrils ready for another victim. His body is then unceremoniously dropped onto the pavement below. He cries out in agony, realizing his leg is shattered from the fall. Inside, the grotesque creature turns its head with a sudden jerk. It peers down through the hole in the ceiling, watching the scene below. Minho's friend lies on the pavement, his body screaming in pain. His vision blurs as he tries to comprehend the monstrous thing he just saw. But through the haze of pain, a single thought surfaces. He's still alive. He forces himself to his feet, stumbling across the empty schoolyard. In the distance, he sees the soldiers he was trying to reach, now forming a barricade. He calls out to them, desperately trying to warn them about the monster still inside. But his plea is met with the cold, unmistakable sound of a rifle being raised. But the commander gives the order to prepare to fire. Minho's friend can only stare back, wondering why they're aiming at him. A soldier warns him that another step will be his last. His face is a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. But behind the soldiers, a new figure with a skull mask quietly appears. Its eyes glow with a malevolent red light, a twisted smile on its face. The boy's hope shatters as he realizes he's trapped between two threats. The commander then raises his voice, issuing a city-wide declaration. He announces that from this moment on, all of Songcheon City is under lockdown. Elsewhere, the scarred man from the beginning calmly adjusts his tie, ready for what's to come. He's told that his time is up, and he calmly buttons his suit jacket. The commander on the ground acknowledges the order with a grim expression. The scene shifts, following a pair of dress shoes walking with purpose. A man in a suit approaches a podium in a grand empty hall. He steps into the blinding light of a massive press conference. Leaning into the microphones, he prepares to address the nation. He introduces himself as President Young Hyun-gu of the Republic of Korea. The crowd of reporters looks on, their faces a mixture of confusion and concern. His reflection is captured in a camera lens as he makes a stunning declaration. Announcing that he has sold the entire city of Songcheon to the devil, the commander's voice rings out, declaring the entire city is now under lockdown. And standing before the soldiers is a small, doll-like creature with a terrifying skull for a face. Minho's friend, still on the ground, can't comprehend what's happening. He looks back at the military barricade, his mind reeling from the impossible situation. Meanwhile, the rest of the students pour out of the school in a desperate stampede. The boy can only watch the chaos unfold, his face pale with fear. But through the panicked crowd, the student with glasses spots a familiar face and calls out to Minho. He rushes over, overcome with relief to find his friend is safe. He joyfully declares that they're saved now that the soldiers have arrived. But Minho's eyes narrow, sensing that something is terribly wrong. He can't shake the feeling that this isn't a rescue mission at all. The doll-like creature just stares back with a chilling, unblinking grin. Suddenly, a piercing sound cuts through the air, causing the students to cry out in pain. The commander raises a megaphone to his lips and begins to issue a presidential emergency order. He declares the entire city of Songcheon a Level 1 quarantine zone. From this moment on, everyone inside is stripped of all rights and protections. The students can only stare in disbelief, unable to process what they're hearing. His friend screams at him to snap out of it and run, while a teacher desperately pleads with the soldiers, unaware they aren't there to help. The teacher screams at the soldiers, demanding they either fight the monster or get out of his way. But a young soldier simply warns him to stand back, threatening to open fire. The man is completely bewildered, his hands raised in desperate confusion. His gaze is then drawn upward by a new, terrifying sight. A grotesque creature clings to the side of the school building, raining down debris. It's the sobbing monster from before, now looking down with a twisted, stitched-up smile. The horrifying figure is reflected in the lenses of the teacher's glasses. He finally breaks, scrambling away in a desperate attempt to escape. But the soldier simply raises his rifle, taking aim at the fleeing man. Minho and his friend can only look on, horrified by the turn of events. A pair of glasses tumbles through the air, followed by a spray of red. The young soldier's face is a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. He trembles, still holding the rifle he just fired. Through a hole in his own hand, Minho stares at the soldier who pulled the trigger. The teacher collapses to the ground, his desperate plea silenced forever. Meanwhile, the sobbing monster leaps from the building and lands with a heavy thud amidst the panicking students. They can only scream, trapped between the soldiers and this new horror. But the creature simply raises its hands to its face and lets out another silent, mournful sob. Its jaw unhinges, revealing a cavernous, empty maw. From its mouth, dark tendrils erupt, sweeping through the panicked crowd. Minho grabs his friend, pulling him back from the immediate danger. He glances over his shoulder, his eyes filled with a grim resolve. But a new horror descends upon them, a shadowy skull with glowing eyes. They can only watch as another student is snatched away by a dark tendril. His friend can only stammer in terror, trying to warn Minho of what's behind him. Minho turns, his face draining of all color as he sees the impossible sight. Before them stands a grotesque tree of darkness, its branches adorned with the bodies of their classmates. He can only look up in silent horror, completely overwhelmed by the scale of the massacre. The tendrils seem to be draining the life from their victims, funneling it all into a grotesque, pulsating mass at the base of the tree. Minho and his friend can only stare, their faces pale with shock. Even the soldiers are frozen in place, completely horrified by the sight. But the small, doll-like creature smiles, announcing that its collection is complete. It stands before the horrific tree, a tiny figure orchestrating a grand massacre. The soldiers watch from a distance, their barricade now seeming utterly useless. One of them turns to his captain, desperately asking for an explanation. But the captain can only recall the chilling words of his commander, who told them that everything happening here is for the sake of what's left of humanity. The small creature reaches out, placing a hand on the pulsating mass at the base of the tree. Its fingers sink into the grotesque flesh, creating a dark, empty void. The doll-like monster looks on, holding its skull mask in one hand. It then raises the mask, fitting it over its own face. Suddenly, a thin red line cuts through the darkness, aimed directly at the creature. The creature is struck, its form dissolving into a spray of dark fluid. But it just smiles through the splatter, completely unharmed by the attack. It stands before the horrific tree, declaring it's time to summon a god. The creature then begins to sink into the shadows below, its grin the last thing to fade. Nearby, Minho and his friend struggle on the ground, barely conscious from the ordeal. Minho's friend looks up, his face a mask of pure terror. His eyes widen as he sees something impossible falling from the sky. A body plummets towards them, its eyes glowing with a strange, vacant light. It crashes to the ground just inches away from the two boys. The grotesque tree begins to release its victims, their lifeless forms raining down from the branches. Minho and his friend can only watch as one of the fallen students begins to twitch. His friend struggles to breathe, completely overwhelmed by the unending horror. He looks back towards the barricade, his last hope resting with the soldiers. The captain stares back, his face a grim mask of resolve. Reminded of his orders, he steels himself for what must be done. The captain's voice cuts through the chaos as he issues a new command. His platoon moves in, not with weapons raised, but carrying large white sacks. They show no mercy, stepping over the fallen as they begin their grim task. One of the soldiers begins to pour a strange white powder from his bag, creating lines on the ground that encircle the bodies of the students. Above, a helicopter's searchlights cut through the darkness, illuminating the horrific scene. Inside, a cameraman can only pray as he documents the events unfolding below. His lens captures every horrifying detail for the world to see. and that feed is being broadcast live, a silent prayer echoing in the background. In a secure room, the president and his cabinet watch in horror, witnessing the price of their deal. On a monitor, the president watches as the massacre unfolds across 9 different sectors of the city. He orders his team to zoom in on the chaos at Siowa High School. The schoolyard is now a canvas of blood, marked with a massive, unholy sigil. And at its center stands the small, doll-like creature, surrounded by the fallen. The president can only watch, his face grim as sweat beads on his forehead. The creature stands barefoot in the carnage, a picture of unsettling innocence. She explains that the blood and suffering of the innocent have forged a massive gate. With a terrifying grin, she declares that all the preparations are now complete. All that's left is the final key to open that gate, which she prepares by biting her own thumb. She holds out her bleeding finger, revealing the final ingredient, the blood of one who desires. A single drop of blood hits the surface of the sigil. Minho and his friend can only watch, their faces frozen in terror. Even the hardened soldiers are paralyzed by the impossible sight. And from his command center, the president watches the final act begin. The pool of blood begins to churn and bubble, as something massive starts to stir from within the depths. The souls of the fallen students swirl within the unholy mixture, and then, a colossal hand erupts from the ground, dwarfing everything in sight. A new face appears, its eyes glowing with malevolent power and a terrifying grin. The summoned god has finally arrived, a being of pure darkness and unimaginable scale. Minho's friend can only stare, his mind fracturing under the weight of the impossible horror. His thoughts flash to a memory of a happy couple in his class, bragging about their future together. But that memory twists into a grotesque vision of them being consumed, their hands clasped in a final tragic embrace. He remembers a cheerful athlete, always encouraging his teammates on the field, and then sees him being devoured by a ravenous, tentacled beast. He recalls a cruel bully tormenting another student in the halls, only to see that same bully begging for mercy as monstrous forms consume him in turn. The visions blur together, a horrifying montage of countless other victims and their twisted fates, and his mind snaps back to the present, his face a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. The soldiers can only stare in horror at the grotesque forms before them. One of them is completely paralyzed by fear, sweat beading on his brow. A voice calls out to him, a desperate plea for help. It's a student, trapped within the gaping maw of a monstrous creature, begging to be saved. The soldier's eyes narrow, his shock hardening into resolve. The trapped boy continues to scream, his face a mask of pure agony. But the soldier's expression remains unchanged, his gaze fixed. His desperate cries echo across the schoolyard, a plea for salvation. And then a single shot rings out, striking the creature. He turns to see his fellow soldier has taken aim and fired. The soldier who fired stands frozen, his eyes wide with shock. His captain whirls around, demanding to know what he's just done. The young soldier can only stammer that the monster was eating people right in front of them. And inside the creature's maw, the trapped student continues to beg for his life. But his pleas are cut short as the monster's flesh closes around him. The massive beast seems completely unfazed by the gunfire, smoke rising from its hide. It lumbers past the soldiers, who can only stare in stunned silence. A grotesque, almost human-like smile seems to form on its face. Another young soldier looks on, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. The creature towers over them all, a monument to their powerlessness. The soldiers are frozen, one collapsing to the ground in utter despair. The captain can only stare, his mind struggling to comprehend the impossible horror. But another soldier turns back, his expression cold and unreadable amidst the chaos. Suddenly a car barrels into the schoolyard, a beacon of hope for the fleeing students. Behind the wheel, a man grips the steering wheel, his face a mask of grim determination. The students recognize him as their history teacher, believing he's come to save them. But his gritted teeth tell a different story, a desperate mantra of his own survival. He frantically waves them over, urging them to get inside the vehicle. Minho's friend grabs him, overjoyed that they finally have a way out. But Minho's expression is one of doubt, sensing that this escape is not what it seems. And Minho's instincts were right. The teacher's face is a mask of pure desperation. He ignores the desperate pleas of the other students, his smile turning cruel. He plows through the crowd without a hint of remorse, sending bodies flying in his selfish bid for freedom. He screams for everyone to get out of his way, his only concern being his own escape. His car smashes through the military barricade, a final desperate act. But the commander doesn't hesitate, immediately giving the order to fire. A hail of bullets riddles the windshield, striking the teacher inside. His face is a mask of agony as the shots find their mark. And his selfish escape ends as he slumps over the wheel, silenced for good. But even with the driver gone, his foot remains pressed on the accelerator. The soldiers can only scream for everyone to get out of the way as the car keeps coming. It smashes through the last of their defenses, scattering bodies in its wake. The vehicle finally comes to a stop, a twisted wreck in the middle of the carnage. His friend turns to Minho, his voice trembling as he asks what they're supposed to do now. A grim, almost unhinged smile spreads across Minho's face. He looks at the bodies of his classmates, his mind racing for an answer. But surrounded by monsters, he admits that he has no idea either. His friend grabs him, desperately trying to snap him out of his despair. He points towards the chaos, telling everyone to look as Minho recognizes their English teacher. The car's wreckage has created a path, a gaping hole in the school's outer wall. He screams for the others to snap out of it and run for the opening if they want to live. With Minho leading the charge, the remaining students make a desperate break for freedom. They scramble over the rubble, using the wrecked car to climb over the broken wall. But outside the gates, the soldiers watch on, noting that the offerings are escaping. The captain doesn't hesitate, ordering his men to prepare to fire on the fleeing students. He brings the radio to his mouth, his expression unyielding. A younger soldier looks to his captain, his face filled with disbelief and horror. But the captain's face is a mask of grim resolve, his orders absolute. Unaware of the danger ahead, the students pour out into the open street. Minho leads the desperate charge, but the monsters are still right behind them. One of the girls is snatched from the crowd, her cries for help echoing in the chaos. Her friends can only watch in horror, calling out her name in vain. Another teacher tries to direct the panicked students towards a nearby bus, but he quickly realizes it's too late for the captured girl, urging everyone to just keep running. They flee down the street, a monstrous shadow looming over their escape. A single discarded shoe is all that's left of their fallen classmate. But then, the teacher spots a sign of hope, a designated shelter nearby. The exhausted students look up, their faces a mixture of relief and disbelief. He sees the entrance to a subway station, believing they've finally found a safe haven. The teacher tries to keep the students calm, urging them to stay together and look out for one another. The English teacher volunteers to scout ahead, telling the other to make sure no one gets left behind. Another teacher relays the instructions, trying to guide the terrified students forward in an orderly fashion. His friend turns to Minho, a look of pure relief on his face as he declares that they're finally safe. But Minho's expression is far from relieved, a deep sense of unease still lingering in his eyes. Back at the barricade, the soldiers watch the fleeing students with an unnerving stillness. One of them turns to his captain, questioning why they're letting the offerings get away. But the captain simply states that their fate is sealed, no matter where they run. The sign for the shelter, once a beacon of hope, is now just another part of the bloody landscape. And a sudden, horrifying realization dawns on Minho's face. He realizes with dawning horror that the entire city of Songcheon is already a graveyard, just like the English teacher who went ahead to scout. The other students can only look up, calling out his name in terror. A massive worm-like creature erupts from the ground, its gaping maw consuming everything in its path. Minho's friend can only stare, his face a mask of pure shock. But Minho grits his teeth, his fear hardening into a grim resolve. He grabs another student, pulling them away from the immediate danger. The scene shifts as the students pour out into the city streets, their desperate flight continuing through the now hostile neighborhood. One of the boys grabs a terrified girl, trying to keep them all together as they run for their lives. Minho glances back, his face a mask of grim determination as he leads the escape. From above, the scattered students look like ants fleeing an unseen terror. His friend finally stops to catch his breath, thinking they've put some distance between them and the school. But he quickly wonders if any place in this city can truly be called safe. His question is answered as a grotesque creature lunges from the shadows behind another student. The boy's face drains of all color, the brief moment of hope completely shattered. Minho looks down a side alley, only to find it teeming with monsters feasting on the fallen. He realizes with horror that new creatures are literally crawling out of the pools of blood. Suddenly, another student leaps into the air with impossible speed. But they can only watch as he's carried away by a winged beast. Another life claimed by the sky. Another student is caught, his face a mask of agony as he's crushed by a monster. Below, a massive foot descends as a girl screams out a name in terror. She falls to her knees, her voice breaking as she pleads for an answer that will never come. And her desperate cries are silenced by a sudden spray of red. Minho and the others can only watch, their faces pale with horror. The girl stands back up, her eyes vacant, and her body covered in the aftermath. But she quickly collapses, another life extinguished in the chaos. A new hulking beast reaches for the fleeing students, its massive hand closing in. Minho and his friends can only look on, their faces grim with the realization that there's no escape. But his friend's attention is pulled away by a new horror peeking around the corner. The remaining students find themselves completely surrounded, a horde of grotesque creatures closing in from all sides. Minho's friend can only stare, his face a mask of pure desperation. Nearby, another student tries to comfort his terrified classmate, but his own tears betray his fear. The sheer terror of their situation has broken another, his eyes vacant and unseeing. But Minho stands firm, his expression hardening as he takes in the impossible scene. The other students turn to a teacher, their voices trembling as they beg for guidance. But she's just as lost as they are, her face a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. Then, a sudden realization seems to dawn on Minho's friend, a flicker of a plan forming in his mind. The teacher's fear suddenly twists into a deranged smile, announcing she has a good idea. She tells them all to watch her closely, as Minho and the others look on with growing suspicion. She calmly picks up a sharp piece of glass from the ground, holding it up with a crazed smile as she tells them to follow her lead. Minho's friend screams at her, completely bewildered by her actions. But Minho freezes, realizing the teacher has completely snapped. Her eyes are wide and vacant, lost in her own terrifying logic. She then ducks behind a pile of rubble, ready to enact her plan. A massive creature immediately snatches her up, holding her upside down. It begins to force her into its grotesque mouth, ignoring her desperate pleas. The beast lets out a silent, horrifying roar of satisfaction. And with a final, crushing grip, her desperate sacrifice is complete. The remaining students can only watch in horror as the creature lets out a guttural cry. The teacher's body is quickly consumed by the grotesque beast. Her sacrifice buys them only a moment as they continue their desperate flight down the alley. Minho's friend finally collapses, his body and spirit completely broken. He struggles to catch his breath, the weight of the unending nightmare crushing him. His mind flashes with visions of the citywide massacre, a hellscape of monsters and victims. He sees a classmate trying to fight back, only to be forced into a creature's gaping maw. He sees another sitting dazed amongst the fallen, the life drained from his eyes. And another is torn apart by winged beasts, his screams lost in the chaos. The horrifying visions shatter his mind, leaving only a vacant, terrified stare. The horrifying visions snap back to reality, where a massive beast looms over him. Minho's friend can only stare up in terror, unable to comprehend the monster before him. His mind races with a single horrifying thought. This is how they're going to die. Nearby, the other student faces his own end, accepting his fate in this hellscape. But just as he resigns himself to death, a sudden sound cuts through the alley. A massive cloud of white smoke suddenly erupts, blinding the creatures. Minho grits his teeth, his despair hardening into a grim resolve. A voice calls out from a nearby window, urging them to come closer. Someone is offering them a way out, a path to a basement shelter. Minho's friend looks on in disbelief, a flicker of hope returning to his eyes. The voice from above warns them that the smoke won't hold the creatures back for long. With a look of grim determination, Minho pushes through the chaos. He grabs his friend, pulling him along and urging him to keep moving. He then turns to the others, screaming for them to follow him to safety. The remaining students scramble through the smoke, helping each other up. Their savior points them towards the open basement door, their only hope of escape. But as Minho stumbles, another student grabs him, and they all make a desperate dash for the shelter. Inside, the man who created the diversion waves them in, a beacon of hope in the darkness. But his friend turns back, calling out Minho's name and wondering why he stopped. But Minho just sits there, completely exhausted by the chase. He knows the smoke is fading, and he needs to get inside, but his body won't move. And just as the smoke clears, a massive creature looms over him, ready to strike. His eyes widen in pure, unadulterated terror. But just as the beast descends, a hand suddenly grabs him by the collar and yanks him back towards the safety of the doorway. It's his friend, screaming as he pulls Minho from the monster's grasp. They both tumble backwards down the stairs just as the door slams shut. The two of them lie in a heap on the floor, finally safe from the chaos outside. Their savior stands over them, urging them to hurry and get all the way inside. The story cuts to a quiet apartment hallway, the silence broken by a sudden impact. And then, the entire corridor is plunged into darkness. Elsewhere, in a different part of the country, the rain pours down on a small snack bar. Inside, two boys take advantage of the owner's absence, helping themselves to the food. A girl with an umbrella calls them out for stealing, but they just brush her off. As they continue to eat, she wonders where the owner could have gone. It turns out the woman ran off after seeing the news report about the massacre at Siowa High. In the foreground, a framed photograph tells a story of its own, revealing a younger, happier version of the scarred man from the beginning, standing proudly with his family. As the world reels from the news, the government faces a barrage of questions about the Songcheon lockdown. President Yoon Hyun-gu stands before the nation, his expression cold and resolute. An aide tries to control the flow, calling on a pre-selected reporter for the first question. The reporter immediately brings up the rampant rumors of military experiments or foreign attacks. He demands to know which entity is truly responsible for the Songcheon disaster, but the president calmly denies both theories, dismissing them completely. He explains that they are facing transcendent beings whose power humanity could not hope to stop. He then makes a stunning declaration. The entity called itself a demon. The room explodes in outrage, the reporters accusing him of making a mockery of the tragedy. But through the chaos, a single hand rises with an unnerving calm. The aide points to the back of the room, inviting the unknown questioner to speak. A young woman with striking, mismatched eyes introduces herself as a reporter from Journal Eye. The other journalists whisper amongst themselves, surprised that her publication was even allowed access. They speculate that the government is trying to manage public opinion, but still find her presence unsettling. Her strange eyes are noted, as is the reputation of her publication, a group known for being completely ruthless in their pursuit of a story. She cuts straight to the point, asking the president what humanity gained in return for selling an entire city to the devil. President Jung stands before them, his expression as cold and unyielding as stone. He reveals the chilling price, the survival of all humanity, minus the 4 million souls trapped in Songcheon. The entire room is left speechless, their faces a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. But the reporter presses on, demanding to know what this demon is and what will become of the people inside the city. She asks if he agrees that sacrificing his own citizens would be the most inhumane act in history. The reporter stands her ground, refusing to let the president evade the question. His eyes narrow as he considers the weight of her accusation. He slowly reaches for the microphones, and with a cold, unwavering gaze admits that he agrees. The room explodes into chaos as the press reels from his stunning confession, but the president simply turns to an aide, calmly requesting they play the prepared video. A remote is activated with a quiet click, and a massive screen behind the podium flickers to life. With a single press of a button, the president prepares to show them the truth. The video feed shows a woman with monstrous features, her companion screaming in terror. The president explains that this is footage from the operation team sent into Songcheon. He admits that his choice was indeed inhumane, his expression hardening. But he argues that the very concept of being inhumane can only exist as long as humanity itself remains. The video then cuts to a distorted broadcast, a message for the citizens of Songcheon. And across the city, terrified survivors watch the message unfold. In the basement shelter, Minho and the others huddle around a laptop, watching the broadcast. His friend can only stare, his face pale with exhaustion and fear. The message echoes through the now silent streets of the quarantined city. A box of pain relief patches lies on the floor of the shelter. Minho's friend carefully applies one to his bruised shoulder. He points out just how battered and bandaged up Minho is after the ordeal. Their savior approaches, also expressing his concern over Minho's injuries. He then thanks Minho, explaining he couldn't just stand by since his own daughter is their age. The man then notes how surprisingly calm Minho seems compared to the other students, and that observation triggers a sudden, startling thought in Minho's mind. Elsewhere in the shelter, the other students are falling apart, worried about their families. Minho watches them, a silent observer of their grief and fear. The man asks if he's worried about his own family, but Minho explains they live far away. The man considers Minho lucky, since his own family is still trapped somewhere in Songcheon. Minho listens intently as the man mentions his own daughter, Huijong. He explains that she lives nearby with his ex-wife, but he hasn't been able to reach them. He's desperate to find them, but sees no way through the monster-infested streets. The fear of what might have happened to his daughter finally begins to overwhelm him. He breaks down completely, his grief twisting his face as he imagines her terror. But his sobbing is cut short by another student, who coldly tells him to shut up. The blonde-haired student complains that the man's crying is giving him a headache. Minho's eyes narrow, recognizing him as the guy who pushed his way into the shelter. He remembers how the student shoved him aside during their desperate escape just moments ago. The blonde student sneers, unable to stand their whining any longer. He directs his anger at the other students, especially those who are crying. He warns them that their loud sobbing is a beacon, drawing the monsters right to their location. He coldly tells the grieving man to keep it up if he wants them all to die. The man's eyes widen in terror, as if hearing a new sound. Another student steps in, telling the bully not to scare them further. But the blonde student just scoffs, mocking his naive outlook. He tells them to look outside and see the hell that awaits them. He cruelly reminds them that their survival is temporary, and their families are likely already gone. But Minho's friend has had enough, grabbing the bully's arm with a look of pure fury. The blonde student shoves him back, blaming him for his near-death experience during the escape. He then coldly asks if it isn't just natural for the weak to die in a situation like this. But Minho's friend just smiles, turning that twisted logic back on him. The bully scoffs at their idiocy, just as another student steps between them. But this student has completely snapped, his eyes wide and unseeing as he declares they're all going to die anyway. He continues his nihilistic rant, a terrifying smile on his face as he accepts their inevitable end. Fed up with the madness, the blonde student delivers a vicious kick to the kneeling boy. The brutal impact sends the broken student flying backwards. The bully's eyes are wide with rage, the pressure of their situation finally getting to him. The grieving man kneels on the floor, his face a mask of terror. But through his fear, he stammers that he's figured out a way. The others turn as he desperately insists there's a way to escape from here. He explains that since the monsters react to sound, they can use that to their advantage. But his plan is cut short as a massive creature smashes through the door. The man can only stare in shock as the shelter's defenses are completely shattered. And from the hole in the ceiling, another grotesque monster descends upon them. It immediately grabs the student who was just kicked, his screams echoing in the small room. The creature's grip tightens, its grotesque form holding him fast. The boy can only look on in absolute terror as he's lifted from the ground. But the blonde student shoves him aside, trying to free the captured boy from the monster's grip. And their savior lunges forward with a knife, his face a mask of pure desperation. He plunges the blade deep into the creature's neck, dark fluid spraying from the wound. The monster's grip loosens, finally releasing its victim. The rescued student collapses to the floor, coughing and sputtering beside the fallen beast. Minho's friend rushes over, asking if he's all right. The boy can only look up, his mind still reeling from the near-death experience. His eyes are wide with the vacant, lingering horror of the attack. The blonde student and the grieving man look on, realizing that these things can be killed after all. The man's expression then shifts as he glances towards the broken doorway, a new plan already forming. The grieving man notes that for now, the other monsters seem to be ignoring their location. He believes that if they act quickly, they might actually have a chance to escape. But the blonde student is skeptical, reminding him of the hellscape waiting just outside. Minho's friend agrees, suggesting they should just wait for a rescue that may never come. The man refuses, his desperation to save his daughter, Huizhang, overriding his fear. He points out their dwindling food supply, arguing that staying put means starving to death. He insists that this brief lull is their only window of opportunity before more creatures arrive. The blonde student is still paralyzed by fear, unable to see past the immediate danger. But their savior's face breaks into a confident smile as he announces he has a plan. He promises to take on all the risk himself if they'll just help him get everyone to safety. The grieving man pleads with them, his face a mask of desperation. He asks them to just hear him out, to listen to his plan. The others reluctantly agree, reminding him of his promise to handle the danger. Overcome with relief, the man thanks them through his tears. The scene shifts to the quiet, monster-infested streets outside. Back inside, he gathers the students to explain his dangerous strategy. He tells them to look out the window at the street below. He points to a line of cars parked along the wall, with his van at the very end. He'll sneak between the vehicles while the students create a diversion from the shelter. Then, he'll drive the van around to the back of the building to pick them all up. He explains that once he's in the van, they'll need to head for an inner room. Inside that room, they'll find a door that leads to the building's boiler room. And from there, a final door will lead them outside, where he'll be waiting. He muses that the building's strange layout, once a nuisance, is now their only hope. But Minho's friend argues that the plan is too reckless for him to attempt alone. The man's expression hardens, insisting that he has no other choice. He turns to face them, declaring he'll do whatever it takes to save his daughter. Minho can only watch, a grim understanding on his face. With the plan set, the man cautiously cracks open the door to the outside, and he's met with the horrifying reality of the monster-infested streets he has to cross. His eyes narrow with grim determination as he begins his desperate run. The street is a war zone, with monsters feasting on the fallen. One of the hulking beasts tears into its latest victim. He crawls through the filth and debris, trying to stay out of sight. Every movement is an agony, his face contorted in a silent grimace. But he lets out a quiet breath of relief, having made it past the first stretch. He reaches the final car, believing he's almost at his goal. Back in the shelter, the blonde student sees the signal and prepares to start the diversion. From the window, they get ready to draw the monster's attention. But it's too late, as one of the massive creatures has already found him. Minho's friend cups his hands to his mouth, letting out a desperate scream. He yells as loud as he can, trying to draw the monster's attention. But his blood runs cold as a massive face presses against the bars of the window. He stumbles backward, completely paralyzed by the sight. The creature's grotesque mouth hangs open in a silent, terrifying roar. The blonde student can only mutter that their diversion was a little too effective. Minho's friend looks back towards the street, his face a mask of pure terror. He desperately pleads for their savior to hurry as more creatures gather outside. The man sees that he's drawn their attention, believing he can now make it to the van. But just as he moves, a bloody hand suddenly grabs him by the ankle. The man looks down in shock, his escape plan completely derailed. It's another survivor, horribly injured and begging for help as they cling to his leg. He grits his teeth, desperately trying to pry the hand away without making a sound. But the injured survivor lets out a pained, desperate scream. And that scream immediately draws the attention of the nearby monsters. The man's face drains of all color, realizing the survivor has just sealed their fate. Back in the shelter, the blonde student watches the scene unfold with a cold, detached expression. The massive creature turns, lumbering directly towards the two trapped men. Suddenly, a grotesque, wrapped hand reaches out from the darkness. The man can only look up, his face frozen in absolute terror at the new horror before him. The monster's face is a grotesque mask of pure, unbridled hunger. It consumes the injured survivor in a single, horrifying motion. And with a brutal swing, it brings its full weight down upon their savior. The man can only cry out as the impact sends him flying through the air. He lands in a heap on the pavement, his desperate plan ending in failure. For a moment, he lies completely still, the life seemingly drained from him. From the shelter, the students can only scream his name in horror. The massive beast stands over his fallen form, ready to finish the job. But then his fingers twitch, a sign that he's not done fighting. His eyes snap open, his mind fixed on the one thing he has left to live for. His daughter. He reaches out, his daughter's name the only thing on his mind. From the shelter, the students can only watch in helpless terror. But with a final burst of adrenaline, his hand finds the door handle. He throws himself inside the van, his desperate gamble paying off. The key finds the ignition as he prepares to start the engine. His foot slams down hard on the accelerator, and the van peels away, leaving the monsters in a cloud of dust. He lets out a triumphant roar, having defied death once again. Back in the shelter, the students erupt in cheers, their hope renewed. Minho's friend quickly reminds them that it's their turn to move. Minho's friend looks on in horror, his eyes wide with disbelief. But their escape is cut short as a massive creature slams down onto the van. Its grotesque hand grips the metal frame, crushing it with ease. He screams that the monster has caught the car, their last hope now trapped. Their savior rallies the others, insisting they need to create another diversion. He runs out into the open, screaming for the creature to look his way. He puts everything he has into the desperate cry for attention. His face is a mask of grim determination, sweat pouring down his brow. But the effort leaves him completely drained, hunched over and gasping for air. The other students realize with dawning horror that their plan isn't working at all. Minho's friend grits his teeth, knowing they have to get the monster off that van. He looks out the window but sees someone has already stepped outside. His eyes widen in disbelief as he recognizes the figure. It's the blonde student, armed with a fire extinguisher and a look of grim determination. Minho's friend screams for him to come back, warning him not to do anything reckless. But the bully just snarls back, arguing that staying put won't make a difference. He pulls the pin from the extinguisher, committing to his dangerous plan. With a furious roar, he swings the heavy canister with all his might. He screams for the monster to turn its attention towards him. His knuckles turn white as he prepares to make the desperate strike. He stands in the open, screaming for the monster to look his way. The fire extinguisher flies through the air, a final, desperate projectile. It smashes directly into the creature's head, finally getting its attention. The massive beast is knocked clean off the vehicle, freeing their only escape. Inside the shelter, the others cheer, believing their plan has actually worked. But Minho's expression is grim, sensing this victory is far from certain, and his fears are realized as another monster closes in on the now defenseless student. Its foot comes down hard, crushing the boy's leg beneath its weight. The blonde student can only scream, his sacrifice turning into his own personal nightmare. The creature then grabs his head, ready to silence him for good. The creature's grip tightens, its grotesque hand crushing down on the boy's head. But just then, Minho's friend grabs a hold of something with a desperate, furious grip. He uses a winged monster as a makeshift weapon, swinging it with all his might. On the ground, the blonde student lies motionless, his sacrifice seemingly in vain. But his friend's face is a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He plants his feet firmly on the ground, his knuckles turning white as he tightens his grip on the creature's leg. He pivots with a surge of adrenaline, channeling all his strength into the desperate swing, and his face contorts in a furious roar as he unleashes his attack. The makeshift weapon connects with a sickening crunch, sending the massive beast flying. It crashes hard into the pavement, its grotesque mouth open in a silent scream. Minho's friend grits his teeth, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him. He stands over the fallen bully, shaking the feeling back into his hand. The blonde student asks if his leg is all right, but his friend just scoffs at the obvious question. But his brief moment of triumph is shattered by a new wave of terror. The monster he just defeated is already getting back to its feet, enraged. The bully asks if he can run, but his friend just notes that his leg seems fine now. The scene cuts to the shelter door, which slams shut just in the nick of time. Inside, the two of them collapse to the floor, completely spent from their desperate fight. The blonde student complains about his leg, while Minho's friend is just relieved they survived. He urges them to hurry to the back, worried the others might have left them behind. Minho's friend cautiously opens the door to the inner room, but he freezes in the doorway as the others ask what's wrong. They look on in confusion, wondering why he's just standing there. His eyes are wide with a sudden horrifying realization. The scene cuts to the van, speeding away down the empty street. Inside, their savior breaks down in tears, apologizing for what he's done. Back in the shelter, Minho's friend stares out at the empty alley, and the crushing truth hits him. The man drove off and abandoned them all. The man's desperate words echo in their minds, his promise to do anything to save his daughter. His friend realizes with dawning horror that they've been betrayed and left for dead. His face twists in pure, unadulterated fury at their impossible situation. The scene cuts to a rainy highway, far from the chaos of the city. A lone taxi makes its way through the downpour, heading towards Songcheon. The driver looks on with a weary expression, his journey cut short. He's stopped by a military barricade, unable to drive any further. His passenger explains that the entire area is under lockdown due to a strange fog. She looks down at a cracked phone screen, a photo of her and her son, Minho. It's Minho's mother sobbing as her daughter tries to reassure her that he'll be all right. The taxi driver realizes with a grim expression that his passenger's son is trapped in the city. His eyes narrow as he glances up at his rearview mirror. He wonders aloud what that strange fog could possibly be, but his gaze is fixed on something reflected in the glass. A monstrous, shadowy figure looms in the reflection, a sign of the horrors within. The story jumps forward to day 5 of the quarantine, where the students lie exhausted in the shelter. The sink is overflowing with empty containers, their food supply clearly running low. And the refrigerator is almost completely bare, confirming their desperate situation. The remaining survivors sit against the wall, their faces buried in their hands in utter despair. Minho's friend lies curled on the floor, completely drained by the unending nightmare. One of the students has completely lost it, his eyes wide with madness. Even Minho sits slumped against a wall, his spirit seemingly broken. Another survivor mutters that he can't take this nightmare any longer. But the blonde student rises, insisting they have to find a way to escape. He gestures to his own bandaged leg, a grim reminder of their last fight. He points out that their food supply ran out a long time ago, and the rotting head of the monster they killed is filling the room with a foul stench. He gestures to the others, who have clearly been broken by the unending horror. But Minho's friend tells him to be quiet, worried his shouting will attract more monsters. A girl begs him to stop, her own fear and despair bubbling to the surface. The other students can only weep, their hope completely shattered. But the blonde student insists they need to come up with a plan to escape. He looks over at the student who has completely broken down, whose eyes are wide with a terrifying, vacant stare. As night falls over the city once again, the student who was kicked earlier has succumbed to his injuries. The boy who lost his mind now kneels over the body, his tears falling onto the grotesque, decaying face of his friend. The dead student's eye is a horrifying, inhuman orb, and the kneeling boy's own tears begin to turn thick and black. He presses his hands into the grotesque flesh of his fallen classmate. His eyes are wide with a terrifying madness as black tears stream down his face. He continues to push, his hands sinking deeper into the decaying form. And his eyes turn completely black, the last of his humanity seemingly gone. A dark, viscous fluid begins to pool on the floor beneath him. Nearby, the other students lie on the ground, too exhausted to even notice. The boy then rises, laughing maniacally that he's alive while everyone else is dead. Minho's friend looks up, completely bewildered by his insane rambling. But a new figure emerges from the shadows. A small girl with a knife who declares that she's won. The blonde student gets to his feet, demanding to know who this strange newcomer is. The insane student's mouth hangs open in a silent, grotesque laugh. And the small girl reveals her own monstrous form, her face a twisted mask of flesh. The other students can only cower in terror at this new, impossible sight. The blonde student stares in disbelief, asking what kind of creature she is. She explains that a monster tried to swallow her, but she managed to fight it off. The insane student's face contorts, his features twisting into a grotesque form. A girl with glasses questions her story, unable to comprehend what she's hearing. But the insane student looms over her, his eyes wide with a terrifying grin. His hand clenches into a tight, blood-stained fist. He gets right in her face, demanding she admit that she saw it happen too. The insane student continues his rant, insisting the monster died trying to consume him. He then makes a horrifying suggestion, telling the terrified girl she should try it herself. The blonde student has finally had enough, grabbing the boy from behind. Meanwhile, the strange girl collapses to the floor, her knife clattering beside her. He tells the crazed student to snap out of it, his patience completely gone. But the girl on the floor isn't done yet, her expression unreadable. Her hand slowly closes around the handle of the blade. She holds the weapon up, her eyes wide with a terrifying, vacant stare. The blonde student lunges, grabbing her by the throat and warning her that this madness will get them all killed. But she just looks back with tears in her eyes, convinced they're already dead. Her words trigger a flood of memories for the insane student, starting with his best friend. He remembers finding his friend's body, another victim of the massacre. He then recalls the English teacher, who had always been so kind to him, and the horrifying moment he was consumed by the monsters outside the school. His mind flashes to the girl he liked, a brief moment of happiness in the hallway. But that memory is also tainted by the image of her violent end. The weight of it all comes crashing down as he realizes everyone he cared about is dead. Even the blonde student is taken aback by the raw, unfiltered grief. The boy can only weep, his body bruised and his spirit completely shattered. The girl with glasses kneels before him, asking his name as he introduces himself as Song Young-ju. She gently asks what grade he's in, and he tearfully admits he's just a first year. She tries to comfort Young-ju, acknowledging the immense trauma he's been through. She urges him not to give up, telling him they just have to hang on a little longer. With a reassuring smile, she promises that she'll help him through this. The two of them share a fist bump, a small moment of connection in the darkness. The blonde student and Minho's friend look on, wondering if this small act of kindness can actually help. With the immediate crisis averted, the blonde student suggests they all get some sleep and make a real plan tomorrow. And just when it seems like a fragile peace has settled over the group, a completely unexpected act of violence shatters the calm as a hand plunges a blade into his back. It's the girl with glasses, her face twisted into a monstrous scream as she attacks the boy she just comforted. The remaining students can only scream, their faces frozen in absolute horror. The girl with glasses stands over her victim, her face splattered and her expression completely broken. A deranged smile spreads across her face as she stands amidst the carnage she just created. The story then cuts to a quiet port somewhere in the metropolitan area. A large warehouse door slides open, revealing a secret meeting inside. The scarred man from the beginning listens as a subordinate summarizes the situation. He recounts how President Jung sold the city, which was then enveloped in a mysterious fog. He continues, explaining that soldiers were placed at 12 key locations to perform a summoning ritual. The scarred man confirms the details, as his subordinate adds that the city was then overrun, and that the monsters that appeared vary wildly in size, shape, and power. But he adds one more unusual detail. The monsters seem to be able to distinguish soldiers from civilians. The scarred man asks for clarification, and his subordinate confirms the creatures instinctively recognize something. A slow, knowing smile spreads across the subordinate's face. With a sinister grin, he tells his boss to look into that information more closely. The scarred man looks uneasy, questioning why his subordinate is so invested in Songcheon. The man with glasses just smiles, asking why a businessman wouldn't be interested in a golden opportunity. He gestures to a massive, lumpy bag, explaining that fate has delivered something valuable into their hands. He declares that if their plan succeeds, their days of running errands for old men will finally be over. His eyes glint with a cold, ruthless ambition. He then turns to a report, asking a chilling question about monsters being born from blood. The scarred man realizes the horrifying, literal truth of his subordinate's words. The man with glasses explains that when enough blood gathers in one place, new monsters will literally crawl out from the pools of the fallen. The scene flashes back to the shelter, where the girl with glasses stands over her victim with a terrifying smile. A vision of a grotesque creature consuming a body illustrates the horrifying cycle of death. One of the men in the warehouse looks on, his face pale with shock. The vision continues, showing a victim being crushed in a monster's grip. The creature's hand tightens, a horrifying display of raw power. The man can only stare back, his mind completely shattered by the implications. The scene then cuts to a quiet, closed door. The silence a stark contrast to the horror just witnessed. Back in the shelter, the remaining students make a desperate break for it, fleeing the madness within. But they run straight into a new nightmare, as grotesque creatures block the stairwell. Minho screams for them to head for the upper floors, their only possible escape route. They scramble up the stairs, a horrifying slug-like monster crawling up from below. But their hope shatters as Minho realizes all the doors to the upper floors are locked. He understands with dawning horror that they have nowhere left to run, but his fear hardens into resolve as he thinks of one last chance. He points to the top of the stairs, telling everyone to make for the rooftop. His friend reaches the door first, desperately trying to get it open. But the knob just rattles in his hand, their final escape route completely sealed. His friend's face falls, the crushing reality of their situation finally sinking in. But Minho has had enough, shoving his friend out of the way with a furious roar. He throws his entire body against the door, smashing it open and crashing onto the rooftop. His friend rushes over, asking if he's all right after the desperate move. Minho gets to his feet, insisting he's fine as he looks out over the city. His gaze drifts across the sprawling, monster-infested landscape. He takes in the full scale of the hell that Songcheon has become. The other students can only stare, their faces a mixture of shock and terror. But their brief moment of escape is shattered as a grotesque face peeks through the broken doorway. The massive creature begins to squeeze its horrifying form onto the rooftop. One of the students screams in terror as the monster fully emerges from the doorway. Another grabs his head, his face a mask of pure panic as he tells everyone they have to run. Minho's friend can only stare, sweat beading on his face as he processes their impossible situation. The camera pulls back, showing the small group trapped on the rooftop with nowhere to go. The friend's eyes are wide with fear, convinced that this is the end for all of them. But a hand suddenly rests on his shoulder, trying to ground him in the chaos. It's Minho, who insists there's still a way out as he holds up a bundle of thick cables. He grips the frayed ends of the electrical wires, a desperate plan forming in his mind. The blonde student explains what they are, as one of the girls asks what he's going to do with them. He points out the old wiring on the building, explaining they'll tie one end to this rooftop, and then jump to the next building to secure the other end. The rest of them will then use that wire to cross the massive gap, but his friend immediately calls the plan impossible. Pointing out the next rooftop is at least 5 meters away. The student with glasses corrects him, stating the exact distance is 7 meters and 45 centimeters. Minho calmly reveals that this is his personal long jump record. His face hardens with resolve, convinced that he can make the jump. The other students can only look on, completely stunned by his confidence. But the blonde student screams at him to hurry, pointing to the monster now looming behind them. Minho steels himself, his eyes fixed on his goal as he prepares to leap. A memory surfaces of his coach telling him he'll never make it. His harsh words question the point of practice without a strong heart. He's called a coward who always chokes when it matters most. The memory echoes in his mind, telling him he can't do anything. But that doubt is replaced by a surge of pure, unyielding resolve. With a defiant roar, he launches himself across the impossible gap. He soars through the air and lands perfectly on the opposite rooftop. His foot plants firmly, securing their only path to safety. The other students can only watch, their faces a mask of disbelief. The student with glasses stares, completely stunned by the impossible feat. The strain of the impossible jump is clear on Minho's face. He secures the cable, creating their only escape route. The blonde student grits his teeth, realizing their plan might actually work. He can't believe it, muttering that the impossible plan is working. But the monster from the first roof has followed, lunging at Minho as he vows to save everyone. The others can only watch in absolute terror, their hope instantly shattered. Minho glances down, seeing the alley below is still swarming with creatures. He and the student with glasses realize there's no easy way down from here either. The blonde student calls out to him, a new idea forming in his mind. He asks if Minho knows how to perform a breakfall, a skill that might just save their lives. The blonde student explains that once Minho is on the ground, he'll become the bait. He clasps his hands, demonstrating the proper technique. He insists that while the monsters are distracted, it will be their only chance to escape. Minho's friend can only stare back, horrified by the insane suggestion, but the student with glasses agrees, realizing that doing nothing is a death sentence. With the plan set, Minho takes the cables and prepares for his part. The blonde student looks on, his face a mask of grim determination. He quickly demonstrates the proper form for the breakfall one last time. He tells Minho to aim for the pile of trash below to cushion his fall. But Minho's friend screams that the plan is nothing short of a suicide mission. The blonde student stretches, insisting that this is their only chance to survive. But Minho's friend can only scream, horrified by the thought of Minho sacrificing himself. Minho ignores his pleas, grabbing the thick bundle of cables with both hands. He quickly practices the breakfall just as he was shown, tucking and rolling to absorb the impact of the fall. He comes to a stop, the cables still clutched tightly in his hand. With a final look of grim determination, he gets back to his feet. He glances back one last time, his mind completely made up. The others can only watch from the ledge, their faces pale with fear, and with a final desperate roar, he pulls the cable taut, ready to make his move. But their desperate escape is being watched from above by a small, hovering drone. Its camera lens whirs, capturing every detail of the scene below. The feed shows the students making their perilous journey across the makeshift zip line, and that footage is being monitored by President Young from his command center. Elsewhere, a man with a bandaged head watches the same events, his face slick with sweat. His eyes are wide with a mixture of shock and disbelief at what he's witnessing. Back in the command center, the doll-like creature appears, asking the president if he regrets his decision. It mockingly compliments him on creating such a well-made specimen for its ritual. The creature admits the results exceeded its expectations, gesturing to the horrific tree of bodies. And thanks to that sacrifice, it was able to open the gate with ease as the massive hand rises once more. President Jung grits his teeth, the weight of his decision pressing down on him. The creature reminds him of their deal, a smug look on its face. It warns him that any weakness now will cost him everything he fought to protect. Its grin widens, a picture of pure, unadulterated evil. Back on the rooftop, the blonde student throws off his jacket, ready to make the crossing. He turns his back to the others, preparing to be the first to go. His face is a mask of grim determination, all fear replaced by resolve. The cable is now secured, their only lifeline stretched across the chasm. On the ground lies the doorknob Minho broke off in his desperate charge. And the door to the rooftop now stands sealed, their path of retreat completely cut off. Through the peephole, they check the path ahead. Minho's friend confirms the coast is clear, at least for now. But the student with glasses mourns the two classmates who didn't make it across. Their desperate crossing cost them dearly, with two students falling to their doom. Minho can only grit his teeth, the weight of their losses pressing down on him. The others look on, their faces a mixture of shock and exhaustion. The blonde student sits apart from the group, his injured leg clearly taking its toll. Sweat pours down his face, his expression twisted in pain. The student with glasses approaches, noticing how unwell he looks. He realizes with dawning horror that the leg has become infected, showing signs of sepsis. He warns the blonde student that if left untreated, the wound will be fatal. The blonde student just glares back, sweat beading on his face. The others look at him with surprise, and he asks what's with their expressions. He scoffs, asking if they thought he was an idiot just because of how he acts, insisting he's smarter than them. The student with glasses wonders how he knows so much about medicine, but the blonde student just gets defensive. He then changes the subject, pointing out that they've been together for days without really getting to know each other. And he directs his attention to a quiet girl in a hoodie, calling her out by name, Chae So-hee. The girl pulls down her hood, offering a shy, awkward greeting. The student with glasses turns to Minho, shocked that he doesn't recognize her. A flashback reveals she's the sophomore class president, a popular and wealthy student. The blonde student adds that she's so popular, there's no way anyone wouldn't know her. The student with glasses admits it did seem strange for someone like her to keep her face hidden for so long. Minho's friend is still surprised, but the other boy points out they've been trapped together for days now. He then chides Minho for being completely oblivious to the people around him. But the blonde student brings up a more unsettling thought. It seems all the other wealthy kids knew to run away beforehand. Which raises the obvious question of why Chae So-hee is still trapped here with them. Minho dismisses the speculation, deciding it doesn't matter in their current situation. He turns his attention to the blonde student's leg, insisting they need to find a hospital. But So-hee points out the obvious flaw in that plan, doubting any doctors would still be around. Minho remains hopeful, recalling a hospital nearby that he used for his sports injuries. He explains that the building houses several clinics, increasing their chances of finding a doctor. The blonde student agrees, suggesting they move at nightfall since it's only a short walk. But So-hee voices her concern, reminding them of the monsters still lurking outside. The student with glasses suggests they might be able to sneak by unnoticed. He recalls how the man who abandoned them moved stealthily, noting the monsters don't have sharp senses. He believes that if they're quiet and careful, they might just be able to avoid being caught. So-hee agrees with his logic, but adds that they need to be more cautious this time. She reminds them that their last savior was caught because he trusted a stranger too easily, and their desperate rooftop crossing still cost them 2 of their classmates. She quickly clarifies that she's not blaming anyone, just pointing out that they've been acting too hastily. But the blonde student scoffs, finding her cautious approach ridiculous. He questions why she didn't step up sooner if she's so capable, instead of just hiding under her hood. So he looks away, unable to meet his accusatory gaze. She explains that the reason she was hiding was because of a memory from before the city fell, when things were still normal. She remembers feeling overwhelmed, leaning against a wall just to catch her breath. Even then, another student had noticed her distress, calling out her name in concern. Her classmates had rushed to her side, relieved to see that she was safe. They all looked to her for strength, admitting that her presence alone made them feel at ease, and she had simply smiled, telling them to trust her, hiding the immense pressure she was under. But the memory that haunts her is one of pure, paralyzing terror. She remembers watching a classmate get consumed, screaming her name for help. The desperate cries for a savior she couldn't be echoed in her mind. She could only clench her fist, completely powerless to intervene. And so she hid, pulling up her hood to block out the world and her own failure. Back in the present, the weight of that memory still lingers in her eyes. She clenches her fist, the shame and fear still fresh. But she grits her teeth, forcing the painful memories down. With a strained smile, she claims she was just hiding because she hadn't washed her hair. But the blonde student's eyes narrow, clearly not buying her flimsy excuse. He tells her to keep her opinions to herself, accusing her of doing nothing while they risked their lives. The student with glasses tries to calm him down, but Soo-hyuk admits he's never liked her. He explains that her forced smiles and hidden feelings remind him of someone he despises. So-hee can only look down, her face flushed with shame. But Minho suddenly turns, cutting the argument short. He hoists the injured Soo-hyuk onto his back, telling him to save his anger and get ready to move. With his rival on his back, Minho begins to lead the way down the stairs. He tells the others that while So-hee has a point, now is the time for action, not debate. He adds that he's never forced anyone to follow him, leaving the choice up to them. As they head down, the student with glasses suggests they find some shoes, while So-hee quietly follows behind. Under the light of a full moon, the city of Songcheon remains eerily silent. The students have reached the ground floor, ready to make their move. Minho's friend cautiously peers through the glass door and confirms that the immediate area appears to be safe for now. Minho turns to the injured Soo-hyuk, telling him it's time to go. The blonde student reluctantly accepts the help, getting onto Minho's back. But his gaze drifts past them, his eyes narrowing with suspicion. He confronts So-hee, questioning why she's following them after her cautious speech. The student with glasses looks on, just as confused by her sudden change of heart. But Minho's friend ignores the drama, carefully opening the door and telling everyone to be quiet. With Minho leading the way, the small group steps out into the darkness. But So-hee's eyes immediately widen in horror at what she sees. Her gaze falls upon the mangled body of another victim lying in their path. It's a grim reminder of the hellscape these streets have become. The sight sends a fresh wave of terror through her. But she forces herself to look away, trying to focus on what's ahead. Soo-hyuk barks orders, telling everyone to keep their eyes forward and not to make a sound. So-hee takes a sharp breath, trying to steel her nerves. She watches them go, thinking how uncool it is that Minho is still the one carrying him. And the small band of survivors continues their tense journey through the silent, deadly streets. The small group makes their way through the narrow, trash-strewn alley, but they freeze as they spot a massive, grotesque creature just ahead. Soo-hyuk grips Minho's shoulder, his eyes wide with alarm as the others look on. They quickly duck behind a car, holding their breath as the monsters pass by. The tension is palpable, sweat beading on their faces as they wait for an opening. Under the pale light of the moon, their desperate journey continues. The night sky offers no comfort, only a silent witness to their struggle. The student with glasses admits they've been wandering for hours, his hope beginning to fade. The unending nightmare has taken its toll on all of them, their minds worn down by the constant fear. He feels his sense of reality slipping away, the horror becoming almost mundane. He admits that after seeing so much death, he's starting to get used to it. He worries they'll all end up going crazy like Youngju, or the girl who snapped back in the shelter. But so he still holds out hope, asking if they could be rescued if they just hide. Soo-hyuk scoffs at her naivety, reminding her that the country has already abandoned them. He insists they were left for dead the moment that strange creature appeared with the soldiers. Minho's friend can only offer a sarcastic remark about his encouraging words. But Minho keeps them focused, announcing they're just around the corner from the hospital. He warns them that the wide intersection will leave them completely exposed. His friend takes a sharp breath, knowing they have to move slowly and carefully. Minho's friend looks ahead, his eyes wide with a sudden dawning horror. He asks why Minho has stopped, wondering if another monster is blocking their path. But the entire group can only stare forward, their destination finally in sight. Because where the hospital once stood, there is now only a massive, swirling void that has consumed it completely. The story then cuts away from the hellscape of Songchun to a modern office building. A young man leaves the office of Journal Eye, announcing that he's heading out for the night. He tells his colleague Dale that it's late and she should go home as well. But in the vast, empty office, she remains at her desk, the last one working. She pores over an old file, examining photos and documents from a long-forgotten case. It's the same reporter from the press conference, her mismatched eyes filled with a cold, unwavering focus. Her mind goes back to the press conference video, wondering what those monsters really are, and what exactly is happening in the quarantined city of Songcheon. Her mismatched eyes narrow, searching for an answer. Her investigation centers on an anonymous package she recently received. Inside are records of bizarre incidents, like a man in 1942 whose organs were fused with a fish from another continent. Another case from 1956 details 12 inmates who simply evaporated from a prison shower. And in 1976, an actor vanished, leaving behind a severed arm that moved on its own for hours. On the surface, the incidents seem completely unrelated, but a chilling suspicion begins to form in her mind, that all of these impossible events are somehow connected to the Songcheon disaster. But her investigation is interrupted by a man who compliments her excellent intuition. Dally spins around, demanding to know who this stranger is. He just smiles, offering to take her to the truth she's so desperately seeking. The man confirms her suspicions, revealing the 3 old cases are indeed connected to the current disaster. He then reveals that President Jung Hyun-gu himself has been investigating them for years, leaving Dale completely stunned. The president, he explains, has been secretly preparing for this, and asks if she's curious to know more. Dale can only listen, her face a mask of tension and intrigue. He then makes a shocking proposal, asking if she'd like to go into Songcheon herself to find the truth. She recoils at the thought, questioning why she would ever enter a city swarming with monsters, but he simply shrugs, telling her it's just a suggestion and he can always ask someone else. The man's eyes narrow, a knowing look on his face, and a confident, almost predatory smile spreads across his lips. He reveals that a group is planning to enter Songcheon soon, and he can get her in with a fake identity. Dale protests, questioning why he's making decisions for her as he turns to leave. He simply remarks that he always thought of her as a cold-hearted person, but she's surprisingly honest with her emotions, leaving her flustered and speechless. With a final promise to contact her soon, the mysterious man vanishes. Back in Songcheon, Minho can only stare at the impossible void that has replaced their destination. Soo-hyuk can only ask what they're even looking at, his own mind struggling to comprehend the sight. Minho's friend is completely frozen, his last shred of hope utterly shattered. He can only stare, his mind struggling to process what he's even seeing. The student with glasses stammers that it somehow looks like a black hole has opened up in the middle of the city. Sohee's face is a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. She looks on, completely paralyzed by the impossible sight. Her eyes dart between the void and the others, searching for an answer. Soo-hyuk grits his teeth, realizing their one destination is now completely gone. But through the fear, Sohee's expression begins to harden with resolve. She finally speaks up, getting the attention of the older students. She suggests they find a pharmacy instead, hoping to at least disinfect the wound. The student with glasses notes that at least the immediate area seems clear of monsters. Soo-hyuk urges them to move quickly, his patience wearing thin. And so they continue their journey through the corpse-littered streets under the pale moonlight. They walk past the impossible void, their reflections warped on its dark surface. But Minho can't help but glance over at the strange phenomenon. He stares into the distorted reflection, trying to make sense of what he's seeing. Because within the warped image, he spots something truly horrifying. His friend's eyes go wide with a sudden dawning terror. Trapped in the reflection is the image of a person, seemingly cut in half by the void. He realizes with horror that the void didn't just consume a building, but people as well. The student with glasses urges Minho to hurry, reminding him they're almost at the pharmacy. But Minho is lost in a memory of another fallen victim on the street. He remembers the final, desperate clench of their hand. Shaking off the vision, they finally arrive at their destination. Inside, they gather what they can, laying out the medical supplies. They quickly get to work cleaning and bandaging Soo-hyuk's infected leg. The blonde student lets out a sigh of relief, feeling like he might actually survive this. But Minho's friend looks on with concern, asking if that's really enough. Minho explains it's only a temporary fix to stop the infection from spreading. Suyak then turns to the others, suggesting that now they can finally make a proper plan. So he teases Suyak, asking if he enjoyed being carried all this way. But Minho's friend asks what plan she has, only to be shushed by the others. Suddenly, the student with glasses freezes, his eyes darting to the side. He spotted something outside, asking Minho if those are people in the distance. The two figures are running desperately, and they seem to be heading straight for them. He immediately panics, screaming for everyone to hide behind the shelves. His face is a mask of pure terror, convinced they're in danger. But as they help Suyak, Minho's friend questions why they're hiding from other survivors. The student with glasses warns him not to be so naive, insisting that in this world, people can be just as dangerous as the monsters, a lesson they should have already learned. The pharmacy door creaks open as the two survivors step inside. Minho and the others watch from their hiding spot, their faces tense. The older man is relieved, noting they've found enough medicine to last a while. He tells his younger companion to start packing up the supplies. The student with glasses whispers that luckily they haven't been spotted yet. The older man urges his friend to hurry, mentioning there are many sick people to care for. Minho's friend wonders if they've found a survivor camp, suggesting they reveal themselves. But the younger man asks a strange question, wondering if his friend really wants things to go back to normal. Suyak agrees with the others, thinking they should ask the newcomers for help. But the younger man's face twists into a deranged grin as he declares he never wants to go back. The students can only watch from their hiding spot, their faces frozen in terror. The younger man reveals that if the world hadn't ended, they'd both be in jail by now. A flashback shows the two of them cornered by police just moments from being arrested. But a monster had erupted from a pool of blood, saving them by slaughtering the officers. The younger man's face is a mask of pure, unhinged glee, believing it was all worth it. Minho's friend looks on, the horrifying truth of their situation dawning on him. The younger man continues, excited that in this new world they can kill without worry. But the older man warns him to be careful, explaining they need to earn the trust of their camp first. The younger man praises his partner's cunning as he continues to pack the supplies. And the older man's face twists into a sinister grin, confirming that once their guard is down, they'll make their move. He fantasizes about taking down the other survivors in their camp, describing in detail how he'll deal with anyone who gets in his way. The older man just listens with a cold, calculating smile. His younger partner celebrates this new world, overjoyed by the chaos. Minho's friend can only watch in horror, realizing they're dealing with complete psychopaths. As the criminals continue to loot the pharmacy, the students remain frozen in their hiding spot. The younger man moves closer, completely unaware that he's just inches away from them. A twisted, unsettling grin spreads across his face. But his eyes suddenly dart to the side, having noticed something out of place. He looks down, his gaze falling directly upon the terrified students hiding at his feet. Minho's friend and Sohee can only stare back, their faces pale with fear. While Suyak grits his teeth, completely trapped by the situation. The younger man's grin widens as he comments on his new discovery, but his partner seems less certain, pointing out that they're just kids. He then offers them a false promise of safety, hiding a hammer behind his back. With a deranged smile, he raises the weapon, daring them to show themselves. But just then, a door behind them slowly begins to creak open. The older man whirls around, startled by the unexpected sound, and from the doorway a new face appears, calmly announcing his presence. He steps out with two others, explaining he was worried about sending the first two alone. The older man chides the newcomer, telling him he shouldn't have come out. The newcomer tries to send him back, but his eyes suddenly widen in shock. He spotted the students, asking if someone is hiding behind the counter. Minho's friend stands, revealing that they're all students from Seowa High. The newcomer seems surprised, asking what a group of kids is doing here. Minho's friend nervously explains that one of them is sick and needs medicine. The newcomer's expression hardens as he declares they need to treat their friend. He then invites the students to come with them, as the first two criminals look on with unsettling grins. The newcomer turns to his group, asking if they're all okay with this new plan. And the older man just smiles, a cold and silent agreement on his face. The older man just smiles, thinking how fortunate these students are to have run into them. But Minho's expression is filled with suspicion, sensing the danger they're in. The newcomer announces that the immediate area is clear. He then tells everyone to follow him quietly as he leads the way. And so the two groups merge, making their way through the dark, empty streets. The younger man worries the students might expose them, but his partner insists no one would believe a group of kids. His eyes narrow with a cold, calculating confidence. Minho and Suyak exchange a worried glance, their instincts screaming that something is wrong. The older man reasons that the students have no real proof of their crimes. He plans to intimidate them into silence for now, and then deal with them later. But the older man leans in, a bead of sweat on Minho's friend's face. He asks if they actually believe the murderous plans they overheard earlier. He then warns them to behave and not ruin the atmosphere at the camp. Minho's friend can only stare back, the unspoken threat hanging in the air. The newcomer leader gives the criminal a stern, disapproving look. The group finally comes to a stop on the dark, empty street. Their leader looks up, announcing that they've finally arrived. The students look on, Minho still carrying the injured Suyak on his back. He reveals their camp is an old church, its steeple silhouetted against the full moon. The leader pushes open the heavy doors, announcing their return as the group heads inside. But Minho remains on guard, his expression filled with a deep, unspoken suspicion. Inside, the church is filled with other survivors, a small community huddled together in the pews. The leader announces their safe return, his words a beacon of hope for the others. An older man, the pastor, greets him warmly, relieved that his prayers were answered. An elderly couple shares a quiet moment of relief, thankful for their safe return. The leader smiles, explaining they were lucky and brought back plenty of medicine. The pastor is overcome with emotion, his eyes welling up with tears of gratitude. But his gaze suddenly shifts, his relief instantly replaced by suspicion. He looks over at the students, wondering who these new faces are. The leader explains they found the kids at the pharmacy, noting that one of them is injured. Minho's friend can only stare back, completely stunned by this turn of events. The leader Yeonsu calls out for someone named Seungho to come over. The pastor is relieved to see him, but Yeonsu explains they have a friend who needs immediate medical attention. He reveals that Seungho is a doctor, telling them to show him the wound. The doctor examines Suyak's leg, impressed that their first aid stopped the sepsis from developing. He asks about other symptoms, and the student with glasses explains his blood pressure was normal at the pharmacy. The doctor is taken aback, realizing the student knows the specific dangers of sepsis, and asks who he is. But one of the criminals just scoffs, complaining that now there are just more mouths to feed. The younger man glares at the students, clearly unhappy with their arrival. He sits down in a pew, aggressively asking if he's wrong for feeling that way. The older man, Geonhu, agrees, warning that in this world, meddling will get them all killed. But Yeonsu steps forward, asking if they should have just left the students to die. Geonhu scoffs, complaining that the end of the world has made everyone brave enough to talk back. He gets in Yeonsu's face, threatening to deal with him personally. The students can only watch, their faces pale with fear as the tension escalates. The other survivors in the pews look on, completely shocked by the confrontation. The entire congregation is frozen, watching the argument unfold in stunned silence. Jeonhu's face is a mask of pure, simmering rage. But his anger is cut short by a small voice scolding him for picking fights with people. He turns to see a little girl who explains that his shouting woke her up and scared everyone. The little girl bows deeply, apologizing for the commotion and promising to give her father a stern warning. She then grabs Geonhu's hand, leading him away as the students watch in stunned silence. Minho's friend lets out a breath he didn't realize he was holding, relieved that the tension has finally broken. Yeonsu turns to them, suggesting they find a place to settle in and get some rest. The camera pans out, revealing the church is filled with dozens of survivors sleeping amongst the pews. Minho and the student with glasses lie down, but their eyes remain wide open in the darkness. Minho can't shake the image of the two criminals, wondering if their murderous threats were real. The student with glasses confirms he heard everything, questioning who would ever joke about something so twisted. So he offers to keep watch, but Minho's friend admits he can't possibly sleep with killers in the room. But she points out that despite the danger, the injured Suyak is already fast asleep. The student with glasses tries to rationalize her behavior, thinking she's just lashing out from the trauma. But Minho's friend insists they need to stay alert, offering to take the first watch while the others rest. Their quiet conversation is shattered by a sudden commotion from the front of the church. A crowd has gathered by the entrance, horrified by the sight of a body just outside the doors. Minho's friend and the others can only stare in disbelief, unable to process what they're hearing. He's instantly filled with regret, realizing they should have warned everyone about the two criminals immediately. His face twists in pure horror, understanding the implications of their silence. Through the glass doors, they see the grim aftermath of the criminals' work. Minho's friend can't understand why they would do this, his mind reeling from the sudden violence. But the younger criminal's face is a mask of pure, unhinged glee, revealing the culprit. The victim's body is a grotesque mess, barely recognizable, and the younger criminal just grins, his eyes wide with a terrifying, unhinged glee. Minho's friend can't understand why that specific person was targeted. The other survivors assume he went outside alone and was caught by a monster, but someone points out his hand was on the doorknob, as if trying to get back inside. The younger criminal agrees, suggesting the man's recklessness could have endangered them all. But Minho's eyes narrow, sensing that something about this story is terribly wrong. He recalls how quiet the night was, noting they never heard a single scream, and he can see sharp wounds on the body, suggesting he was attacked before the monsters even arrived. The younger criminal's crazed expression confirms the horrifying truth. He was the one who did it. The question hangs in the air, wondering who could have possibly done this, but Minho's friend warns him that now is not the time to play detective. He explains that even though no one is saying it out loud, a wave of suspicion is already sweeping through the entire group. And since this happened right after they arrived, they'll be the first ones blamed if they draw any attention to themselves. Their conversation is cut short as a man stumbles forward, calling for his brother. His face is a mask of pure, uncomprehending grief. He takes a few heavy, unsteady steps towards the door and collapses against the glass, calling out the name of his fallen brother. The grieving man presses against the glass, promising to open the door for his brother. But Gaeonhu steps forward, questioning his sanity for wanting to open the door. He calls it the stupidest choice he could possibly make right now. The grieving man turns, his eyes locking onto the criminal he's long suspected. He recalls how Gaeonhu has always looked at him and his brother with hatred, and his hand slowly closes around the handle of a hidden blade. The students can only watch in horror as the man notes how strong Gaeonhu looks. He pulls the knife, his face twisting into a deranged smile as he directly accuses the criminal. Gaeonhu's expression remains cold and unreadable in the face of the accusation, and then a slow, sinister smile spreads across his face. He mockingly asks what the man will do, even if he was the one who did it. The grieving man snaps, lunging forward with his blade in a fit of pure rage. But Gaeonhu sidesteps the clumsy attack with ease, leaving his opponent completely off balance. The students can only watch in horror as the confrontation turns violent. Minho's friend is completely stunned, his mind reeling from the sudden escalation. The grieving man is quickly overpowered, now kneeling on the floor before the criminal. Gaeonhu looks down, offering a twisted compliment about his opponent's talent. The man can only stare back, his face a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. He continues his taunt, saying he's talented at making the worst possible choices, and he follows up his words with a brutal, punishing strike. The grieving man slumps against the wall, knocked completely unconscious. Minho's friend and the student with glasses rush to his side, calling out his name. The student with glasses confirms he just passed out from the impact, a fact Minho's friend can clearly see. But Gaeonhu just scoffs, mocking the man for being so weak after charging in with a weapon. Minho steps forward, questioning if Gaeonhu's response was too extreme. The criminal just looks back with a sarcastic grin, questioning Minho's moral high ground. The student with glasses tries to explain that the man was overcome with grief for his brother. But Gaeonhu twists his logic, sarcastically suggesting grief is an excuse for violence. Even the other students have to admit that while his words are cruel, his point isn't entirely wrong. But Minho insists that Gaeonhu is completely missing the point of their argument. But Minho's question hangs in the air as an older woman asks Gaeonhu if he really did it. Gaeonhu just scoffs, sarcastically calling Minho a profiler for pinning a murder on him. His eyes narrow as he deflects the accusation, insisting that the newly arrived students are the most suspicious ones here. The elderly couple tries to defend them, arguing that they're just children, but the younger criminal chimes in, arguing that age doesn't matter in this world, and admitting he took his first life at 14. Minho's friend can only stare back, completely horrified by the casual confession. But the little girl Dabin steps forward, asking if that's really something to brag about. Gaeonhu's face drains of all color, realizing his daughter has stepped into the confrontation. She looks annoyed, complaining that she turned her back for a second and her father is already causing trouble. He makes a flimsy excuse for his daughter's interruption, apologizing on her behalf. Yeonsu quickly steps in, urging everyone back inside before the blood attracts more monsters. He decides they'll retrieve the body later, once the area is secure. The grim silhouette of the fallen man remains pressed against the glass doors. Later, the students sit together, the weight of the night's events settling over them. Minho's friend rubs his head, overwhelmed by their impossible situation. But his eyes narrow as another, more pressing thought comes to mind. He realizes that ever since they arrived, the other survivors have been watching them with suspicion. The paranoia and fear of their new reality begins to overwhelm him. He turns to Minho, his expression grim as he tries to process it all. But the student with glasses reveals he saw something strange about the body outside. Suyok, resting nearby, asks him to elaborate on what he saw. He describes the purple veins and coagulated blood on the victim's face. So he looks over, asking what that could possibly mean. And Suyok calmly identifies the substance used as a specific anesthetic. The others can only look on, completely stunned by his sudden knowledge. He explains that an overdose of the drug has a very specific effect, causing the exact symptoms the student with glasses just described. The victim would have been paralyzed but fully conscious, unable to even scream for help. But the student with glasses points out the obvious question. How could he possibly know the specific drug just by looking? Minho's friend questions his certainty, asking if he's jumping to conclusions. But Suyok calmly insists that it's not just speculation. He explains that when the doctor was treating his leg, he caught a glimpse of something important. His eyes had drifted over to the doctor's open medical bag, and inside he saw a bottle of that exact drug. The student with glasses realizes the horrifying implication of his discovery. Suyok admits that while they need to be sure, the doctor is now their prime suspect. But his gaze then shifts, a new question forming in his mind. He asks what they're doing, as the other two students are seen cowering in fear. Suyok asks what's wrong, sensing a sudden shift in the atmosphere. His gaze drifts over to the student with glasses. The boy suddenly confronts them, asking if they were just talking about him. His face is a mask of paranoia, his eyes wide with suspicion. He continues his task, carefully disinfecting the wound on Suyok's leg. Suyok questions the repeated cleaning, but the student insists it's necessary to avoid infection. He notes that the wound is looking much better, crediting their quick first aid. But he can't let it go, pressing them again as Minho's friend nervously denies it. Suyok seems to drop the subject, though his expression remains unconvinced. His eyes narrow, a new and unsettling suspicion now directed at one of their own. The student with glasses stares at the doctor's bag, his mind racing with the horrifying implications. Suyok turns to the doctor, ready to confront him with his suspicions. But the student with glasses suddenly snaps, screaming that he can't take this anymore. His outburst ignites the fear in the room, as another man declares he's leaving this place for good. A mother quickly agrees, desperate to find a safer place for her own child. The man tries to take some of the food, causing the fragile piece to completely shatter. But the pastor's calm voice cuts through the rising panic, urging them to settle down. He stands before them all, suggesting this is merely a test of their faith. He warns that selfishness will only make their suffering last longer, and with a reassuring smile, he asks them to overcome this ordeal together. But the grieving man scoffs at the pastor's words, dismissing his faith entirely. His eyes are filled with a cold, simmering rage as he tells the pastor to leave him alone. The pastor just looks on with an unwavering, almost serene expression. He tries to offer comfort, promising that the man's brother is now in a better place. But his attempt to force a prayer is met with a tightly clenched fist. As another survivor tries to get his attention, the pastor remains focused on the grieving man. The man finally snaps, screaming at the pastor and challenging his belief in a god. An elderly woman tries to calm him down, but he angrily pushes her away. His outburst ignites the panic in the room, as another man declares he's leaving for good. And just like that, the fragile peace of the church completely shatters. But Yeonsu steps forward, warning that a panicked rush will only draw more danger to them. He volunteers to go out alone and scout the area for any nearby monsters, ensuring the rest of them can leave safely once he gives the all-clear. A distraught mother begs him to check on Seowa High School, desperate for news about her child. Suyok recognizes the name of their school, but grimly reminds everyone that most of the students are likely already dead, his blunt words plunging the mother into despair. But the other students quickly jump in, insisting that many kids escaped, just like they did. They try to offer her a sliver of hope, telling her not to worry. With his resolve hardened, Yeonsu announces that he'll leave immediately. His expression is a mask of grim, unwavering determination. But Yeonsu turns to the grieving man, Junho, asking him to come along. He suggests they go outside together to properly bury his brother. Junho can only agree, still completely lost in his grief. But the student with glasses worries that Yeonsu could be in danger if he goes alone with the unstable man. Minho steps forward, insisting they should help since Yeonsu brought them here, and volunteers to go with them. But the student with glasses grabs his arm, stopping him. He insists that he will be the one to go instead. He tells Minho that someone needs to stay behind and protect the others, especially since they still don't know what the doctor is capable of. He adds that he wants to see the situation outside for himself so they can make a better plan for what to do next. Minho's friend Seonwoo looks on with a worried expression, but the student with glasses just smiles, promising he'll be careful. Seonwoo suddenly steps forward, insisting that he should go too. Minho can only watch, his own concern growing, but So-hee tries to reassure him, pointing out that their friend is the smartest one in the group. She's confident he'll be fine as the three men head out into the night. Under the pale light of the full moon, the church stands as a silent, temporary sanctuary. But later that night, Minho lies awake, unable to find any rest. He stares into the darkness, his mind still racing with the day's events. Nearby, Suyok sits up, asking Minho what's bothering him. Suyok gestures towards the doctor, his voice filled with contempt. He can't stand the sight of the man acting so innocent, knowing he's a killer. The hypocrisy of it all fills him with a cold, simmering rage. He admits that watching the man makes him sick to his stomach. Seonwoo warns him to keep his voice down, but Suyok doesn't care who hears. The two of them sit in a tense, uneasy silence. But their quiet argument is interrupted as the doctor himself approaches them. He asks if they have something to say, noting how they keep staring at him. Suyok's eyes narrow, his suspicion hardening into a direct challenge. He asks the doctor if he remembers the condition of the body they found at the door. Seonwoo snaps, demanding to know what's wrong with the doctor. The man stammers, claiming he didn't get a good look because the sight made him sick. But Suyok cuts him off, asking if the symptoms weren't from a specific anesthetic overdose. He accuses the doctor of pretending not to know the victim was paralyzed by that very drug. The doctor's face drains of all color, his facade completely shattered. Suyok mocks his convincing performance, saying anyone would have believed his act. But the doctor suddenly calls out to Yeonsu, the leader of their group. He begins to confess, explaining that a few days ago, Yeonsu came to him for something. Minho's eyes narrow, sensing this story is about to take a dark and unexpected turn. The doctor reveals that Yeonsu was the one who took the drug, his confession accompanied by a horrifying vision of the man completely unhinged. Outside, Yeonsu kneels over the paralyzed Junho as the student with glasses looks on in horror. He explains how worried he was that Junho might not have come with him. He reveals he always knew Junho's brother was trash, no matter how well he hit it. And because of people like him, Yeonsu can enjoy himself without feeling any guilt. With a chilling smile, he thanks Junho for showing his true vile colors. He then wonders aloud if the doctor, Seong-ho, was just too naive from his studies. He explains how he lied about being a nurse to get the drug, and the doctor simply handed it over. The student with glasses can only stare, realizing Yeonsu's good image was all part of the plan. Yeonsu then asks Junho if he knows how his brother really died, revealing the syringe in his neck. He explains that he paralyzed the man first, leaving him completely helpless on the ground. Yeonsu holds up the syringe, explaining how he used it to stab the man deep in the back, paralyzing him completely. He then left the helpless man outside. Knowing a monster born from his blood would eventually consume him, he looks back at the student with a chilling, triumphant smile. With the body at his feet, he asks if his plan wasn't absolutely perfect. The scene then cuts to a memory of two boys sitting on a rooftop. It's the student with glasses and the man who was just murdered, back when they were friends. He remembers their conversations, complaining about his friend's constant practice, and he recalls his friend explaining that his parents were rarely home, leaving him alone most of the time. The memory continues, with the murdered man looking over at his friend. He asks Seonwoo a question that's been on his mind for a while. He wonders why Seonwoo is even friends with someone like him. But the memory fades before Seonwoo can answer, a silent testament to their lost friendship. Back in the present, Minho struggles to break free, screaming that Seonwoo is out there with a killer. So he grits her teeth, desperately trying to get him to calm down. Soo-hyuk adds that rushing out blindly is just a suicide mission. But Minho refuses to listen, his only thought being to save his friend. Soo-hyuk can barely hold him back, stunned by the sheer strength of the high schooler. He realizes with a grim certainty that at this rate, Minho is going to break free and run straight into danger. The pastor steps forward, calmly addressing the struggling student. He suggests they all calm down and pray for their friend's safe return, promising that the Lord will protect him. But Jeonwoo scoffs from the pews, sick of hearing about a God who won't come down and fight for them. The pastor ignores him, insisting this is all a test of their faith and that trust will see them through. Jeonwoo just mocks the idea, pointing out that trust has already failed them in this hellscape. He reminds them of the desperation that has turned survivors against each other over scraps of food. With a cruel smile, he suggests that even a god would go mad trying to judge them now. The pastor admits that faith is difficult, but his words are cut short. Minho's friend snaps, screaming at them to stop their debate and help him restrain Minho. But it's too late, as a hand reaches for the door, ready to open it to the horrors outside. But it's not Minho who reaches the door. It's the mother who was worried about her son at Seowa High. She declares that she can't take it anymore and is going to find her child. Overcome with grief, she insists on going to the school to see for herself. The thought of what might have happened to her son is too much for her to bear. But as she looks through the glass, she's met with a horrifying sight. A massive, grotesque creature stands just outside, its face a mask of sorrow. The woman can only stare back, her mind completely shattered by the terror. And the monster crashes through the glass, its massive form lunging right for her. As she collapses in terror, the others scramble to seal off an inner door. They push with all their might, knowing that if this barricade falls, they're all dead. The woman who was just attacked sits on the floor, her mind completely shattered. She lets out a desperate, terrified scream. But the inner door begins to crack under the immense pressure from outside. Jeonwoo screams that the barricade won't hold for much longer. Minho can only watch, his expression hardening with grim resolve. But the panicked woman suddenly offers a horrifying suggestion to create a diversion. She argues they should sacrifice the old and injured since they're doomed anyway. Soo-hyuk immediately snaps, questioning if she's completely lost her mind. Even so, he is horrified by the thought of using another person as bait. But the woman just screams back, demanding to know if they have a better idea. But the pastor steps forward, telling them to open the door on his signal. He tells Gaeonhu to hold the barricade, as the students look on in terror. He then drops a sheathed katana to the floor, revealing his weapon. He unsheathes the blade, promising to strike the moment the door opens. An inscription on the sheath reveals it was a gift for a lifetime of military service. Jeonwoo can't believe they're putting their faith in the old man, but the pastor begins his countdown. His face is a mask of pure focus as he begins the count. The other survivors can only watch in terror as the count continues. And on the count of 3, a hand grips the handle and pulls the door open. But Gaeonhu looks back in confusion, realizing the plan has already gone wrong. The panicked woman screams that their plan is insane and they're all going to die. She desperately asks the pastor if there's another way out, but he confirms they're trapped. Jeonwoo screams that the barricade is about to give way under the immense pressure. And with a final shattering impact, the door is completely blown off its hinges. Jeonwoo is sent flying backwards, thrown across the room by the sheer force of the blast. Minho is also caught in the explosion, bracing himself as debris flies everywhere. Jeonwoo's face contorts in pain as he's thrown through the air. The student with glasses is sent tumbling, his own glasses knocked from his face. Minho hits the ground hard, the impact knocking the wind from his lungs. The church is now a scene of pure chaos, their last line of defense completely shattered. Jianwoo struggles on the ground, his face slick with sweat and grime. But his eyes snap open in pure, unadulterated terror, because a grotesque, smiling face looms over him, its teeth dripping with filth. The other survivors can only scream, completely paralyzed by the new horror. The massive beast stands in the wreckage, a monument to their failed defense. The distraught mother continues to cry out, desperate to reach her child. But her desperate plea is about to be silenced for good. Nearby, Gaeonhu's daughter tries to snap her father out of his daze. She gently shakes him, her small hands trying to bring him back to reality. But her own tears betray her fear, her face a mask of worry for the man she's trying to save. The mother weeps, offering a final, broken apology to her own child. Her eyes reflect the horrifying decision she's just made, to use her own child as bait. With her humanity seemingly gone, she throws the small child towards the monster. It's a desperate, unthinkable act of self-preservation, and she can only scream as the sacrifice is made. The child is left alone on the floor, a tiny figure in a room full of carnage. The scene then flashes back to that same rooftop memory Seonwoo was having. His murdered friend asks him a question that's been on his mind for a while. Seonwoo can only look down, unsure of how to answer. His friend wonders why Seonwoo would be friends with someone like him, who has nothing to offer. The memory continues, with the other Minho admitting he's not good with people and isn't very fun. But Seonwoo just smiles, saying you don't need a reason to be friends. He explains that he just started talking to people, and their friendship happened naturally. The other Minho seems completely taken aback by the simple explanation. Seonwoo adds that his friend is actually quite funny sometimes. The boy can only look back, completely surprised by the compliment. Seonwoo continues, a knowing smile on his face. He explains that while his friend is usually calm, once he snaps, he becomes the most reckless person he knows. And that memory snaps to the present, as the pastor throws himself forward to save the terrified little girl. The other Minho wonders if that's really supposed to be a compliment. But the monster simply holds the pastor and the girl, remarking that it's not a bad thing at all. So-hee and Suyok can only stare, completely baffled by the creature's actions. The other survivors are just as stunned, their faces a mask of disbelief, and the mother who threw the child can only look on in absolute uncomprehending horror. Minho looks up, his own mind struggling to process the impossible scene. The massive beast stands over them, not as a threat, but as a protector. Its face is a mask of sorrow, its eyes filled with a strange, mournful light. The pastor, still in its grasp, stammers out a question to the creature. He tells the beast that it too is one of God's creations. The pastor continues his sermon, insisting that the Lord is watching over them all. He nervously asks the creature to put him and the child down safely. His voice trembles as he pleads with the massive beast, but the monster simply throws them both aside with a brutal, careless toss. The pastor is sent flying through the air, his prayer unanswered. The little girl can only scream as she's hurled across the room, but Minho lunges forward, determined to catch them before they hit the ground. He manages to break their fall, taking the full force of the impact himself. He asks if they're all right, the little girl confirming she's safe in his arms. But the pastor can only groan, the fall having taken its toll on the old man. The pastor can only mutter in defeat, his body aching from the fall. He trembles on the floor, his faith completely shattered by the brutal reality. He looks up to see the massive beast still looming over them all. Its grotesque face is a mask of pure, unreadable power. The old man's eyes widen in terror, realizing the danger is far from over. From across the room, his wife rushes towards him, her face a mask of panic. He can only urge her to run, to save herself from the monster's path. But it's too late as the creature lunges forward in a blur of motion. Its massive form descends upon the helpless woman, and she can only scream, reaching out in a final, desperate plea for a salvation that will never come. But a new monster lets out a deafening, silent roar. The sound is so intense that So-hee and Suyok clutch their heads in agony, and the other survivors are completely overwhelmed by the piercing cry. The hulking beast looms over the terrified survivors, ready to attack. Nearby, the student with glasses looks up, his face a mask of pure terror. He scrambles on the floor, his vision blurred without his glasses. His hand fumbles for the frames, his only link to a clear view of this nightmare. He calmly puts them back on, his panic suddenly gone. And as he rises to his feet, his entire demeanor has changed. The fear in his eyes is replaced by a cold, calculating resolve. The church floor is now littered with the bodies of the fallen survivors. But the student with glasses looks on with a cold, analytical gaze. The pastor's wife weeps over his body as the boy watches from the background. He stands with a newfound confidence, his entire demeanor completely changed. And he calmly faces the massive beast that now stands before the cross. Tears stream down his face, but his expression is one of pure, unyielding resolve. He tells the others that just staring at the monster won't give them any answers. The hulking creature takes a heavy step forward, its attention now fixed on him. Nearby, Gaeonhu struggles to his feet, his mind still reeling from the chaos. As a terrified child calls out to him, the student with glasses has become their unlikely leader. Gaeonhu looks up, declaring that he saw everything. He sits amidst the rubble, his body battered but his mind clear. With a pained groan, He pushes through the agony, and his eyes burn with a newfound desperate resolve. He remembers the massive beast shielding his daughter from harm, and with a quiet reverence, he offers his thanks to the creature. He then rises to his feet, tearing a yield sign from its base. He faces the monster, explaining there's only one path forward now, a single, desperate way for all of them to make it out alive. And with the sign held high, he prepares to fight for that chance. His knuckles turn white as he tightens his grip on the makeshift weapon, his face twisting into a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. And he brings the heavy sign down with a brutal, crushing blow. He screams at the beast, daring it to come at him with everything it has. But the monster just roars back, its fury completely undiminished by the attack. The story then cuts to a quiet, corpse-littered street elsewhere in the city. A lone cat rummages through a pile of trash, a small sign of life in the dead city. It pauses for a moment to clean itself, completely unaware of the horrors that still lurk in the shadows, and its brief moment of peace is shattered by the arrival of the sobbing monster from the school. The cat turns, its brief moment of peace completely shattered, but the creature simply holds out a single delicate flower. It offers the small gift to the cat, a moment of strange tenderness in the carnage. The cat looks up, seemingly unafraid of the grotesque figure beside it. The monster's eyes are vacant, its expression a mask of unending sorrow. But its head suddenly jerks up, its attention drawn by a new sound. Its gaze falls upon the church, the source of the recent chaos. Back inside the church, the broken sign lies on the checkered floor, and a single drop of blood hits the ground, a grim reminder of the fight. Jianhu can only look up, his face a mask of pure, uncomprehending shock. Jianhu hangs upside down, his desperate charge having failed completely. The massive beast holds him by the leg, a helpless trophy in its grip. His daughter can only scream his name, her face a mask of pure terror. His shirt falls away, revealing the intricate tattoos of his past life. The monster roars, its fist clenched as it prepares to deliver the final blow. But Gyeonhu's eyes remain shut, his face a mask of grim acceptance. The creature's expression seems to shift, its rage replaced by a strange sorrow. But Gyeonhu isn't finished yet, his hands clenching into tight fists. He grits his teeth, channeling every last bit of his strength. And the monster's face twists into a wide, unsettling grin. The student with glasses can only stare, wondering if the monster actually just smiled. He realizes this creature's goal isn't to consume them. It just enjoys the act of inflicting pain. Nearby, Soo-hyuk struggles on the floor, his eyes fixed on the pastor's fallen blade. He slowly reaches for the katana, a desperate plan forming in his mind. But a hand suddenly grabs him from behind, stopping him in his tracks. He turns with a look of pure, unyielding determination. It's Sohee, who desperately asks what he thinks he's doing. He tells her he's aiming for the back of its neck, insisting it's their only chance. But she argues that he can barely even walk, calling his plan completely reckless. He snaps at her, demanding to know what she expects when no one else is moving. Sohee can only stare back, his harsh words hitting their mark. He calls her a coward, but she quietly insists that she's not. But their argument is cut short as a new hand reaches for the fallen blade. They both look up, surprised by the sudden intervention. Meanwhile, Gyeonhu clenches his fists, still trapped in the monster's grip. But it's another man, kneeling with his terrified child, who has a plan. He calls out to Minho, his eyes filled with a desperate resolve. He asks our boy if he can somehow knock the massive creature over. He insists that if Minho can just create an opening, he'll take care of the rest. The man offers him the pastor's sheathed katana, his eyes pleading. Minho's gaze hardens, the weight of their lives now resting on his shoulders. Nearby, Gyeonhu's daughter can only cry out for her father. But Minho places a hand on her head, promising to save him and telling her to hide. With his resolve steeled, our boy prepares to make his move. He plants his foot firmly on the ground and launches himself forward with a powerful, desperate kick. His face contorts in a furious roar as he puts everything into the attack. The impact sends the massive creature stumbling backwards, completely off balance. And the monster's face is a mask of pure shock, its eyes wide with disbelief. Minho lies on the ground, having put every ounce of his strength into that single, desperate blow. Soo-hyuk can only stare in disbelief, wondering what Minho was thinking with such a reckless charge. But the man who orchestrated the plan watches with grim focus, his moment finally at hand. The massive beast staggers back, its grip on Gyeonhu finally broken by the impact. The criminal collapses to the floor, freed from the monster's crushing grasp. From the pews, Soo-hyuk wonders if that insane, head-on attack actually worked. Nearby, the doctor's bag lies open, the bottle of anesthetic ready and waiting. The man who gave Minho the weapon moves in, pulling a syringe from the bag. He fills it with the powerful drug, preparing to execute the final part of his plan. Minho grits his teeth, his part of the desperate gamble now complete. But the enraged monster recovers, lunging forward with a furious roar. The man with the syringe braces himself, his window of opportunity closing fast. His eyes narrow with a cold, unwavering focus as he prepares to strike. But the creature is too fast, landing a brutal blow that sends him flying. He's thrown backwards, the force of the impact nearly knocking him unconscious. But he grits his teeth, fighting through the agony with a final surge of will. He digs his heels into the checkered floor, refusing to be thrown aside, and with his last ounce of strength, he plunges the syringe deep into the monster's leg. His face is a mask of grim satisfaction, his desperate gamble a success. He pulls his hands back, the potent anesthetic now coursing through the creature's veins. Minho grabs hold of the massive beast, refusing to let go. The others can only watch in horror, wondering if Minho has completely lost his mind. But Suyak points them to the real plan unfolding just behind the creature. Because Gyeonhu is there, using every ounce of his strength to lift the monster's leg. His face is a mask of pure, unyielding determination. He digs in, refusing to give an inch against the impossible weight. With a final, desperate roar, he heaves the creature upward, and Minho matches his cry, pushing with all his might. Their combined strength sends the massive beast flying through the air. The student with glasses stumbles back as the monster crashes to the ground. The creature's grotesque flesh ripples from the brutal impact. It lies stunned on the checkered floor as Minho collapses from the sheer effort. He can only lie there, his body screaming in protest after the impossible feat. But another figure steps past him, their focus fixed on the fallen beast. They walk right up to the monster, standing over its paralyzed form. It's the pastor's wife, who raises the katana with tears in her eyes, seeking payback for her husband, and she plunges the blade deep into the creature's back with a desperate cry. But her face is a mask of pure shock, realizing her attack has failed. The blade is buried in its flesh, but the monster seems completely unfazed. Minho looks on, realizing with dawning horror that the strike was far too shallow. Her hands tremble on the hilt of the blade, her strength failing her. But the monster's eyes snap open, its bloody hand reaching out from the floor. The pastor's wife can only stare in horror as the creature begins to rise. Her brief moment of vengeance has turned into her final terrifying mistake. But a foot suddenly slams down on the blade, driving it deeper into the creature's back. It's Sohee, who grabs the hilt with both hands, her face a mask of tearful resolve. The older woman can only look on in stunned silence at the sudden intervention. Sohee screams through her tears, finally pushing back against the accusations of cowardice, and she puts every last ounce of her strength into driving the blade home.